If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon, link is in the description.
Chapter 76-76 She's a good person. Walking on the outskirts of Shurima, Lynn has lost count of how many small villages he has visited. Haha. Should I just give up and go back? Exiting a small desert village of a few dozen people, Linwen's eyes twitch as he spots another group of fleeing nomads in the distance. Observing this, Linwen falls silent, but quickens his pace towards the nomads. Encountering Shurima nomads fleeing is good, it indicates danger in the vicinity. Near the border of Shurima, close to the Ikathai region, the likely danger is void creatures. And where there are void creatures in Shurima, there's a good chance Jayce has left her mark. Jayce is someone Linwen needs to befriend, not only because she hails from the void and understands it, but also because Kassadin stands behind her. The future's biggest enemy on Runeterra is undoubtedly the void. Although Linwen isn't sure how long he'll live, considering the cosmic background, he lives in tumultuous times. Linwen roughly knows the major events of the next 20 years, but what happens beyond that? The designers seem to have compressed all major events into these few decades. The Watchers breaking free in the Fruljord, void power lurking in the seas, the return of the Shuriman Emperor, the ruined king. Linwen feels he can't compare to these events. Anyway, Linwen realizes he might not be able to help much in case of trouble, but it's always wise to establish connections with powerful individuals. Among these champions, only a few can truly be considered kind-hearted. Six and Powder are not exactly benevolent, one is lawful neutral, and the other leans towards chaotic evil. Indeed, without Linwen's influence, Powder would be a notorious criminal. That's why someone like Jayce, an inherently good champion, is an excellent choice for making connections. Linwen plans to meet her when leaving Shurima, aiming to establish a casual acquaintance. Jayce's strength and resilience impress Linwen, and her background as a fierce warrior against void creatures adds to her appeal. However, finding Jayce is no easy task, considering Shurima's vastness. Linwen reflects on her combat strategy against the hordes of void creatures, emphasizing her continuous battles and evasive maneuvers. Despite knowing her general whereabouts, locating someone in the vast Shuriman desert, especially someone constantly engaged in guerrilla warfare, proves to be an immense challenge. Linwen can only imagine the hardships Jayce faces in her relentless fight against the void. Regardless, facing the void is an inevitability. Linwen made a promise with Six and Powder to return this progress day. Looking at the time, there's less than 2 months. If he doesn't find Jayce's trail in half a month, Linwen will have to prepare to leave Shurima. Making friends with Jayce will be much more challenging then. Linwen thinks of one thing: he did consider the timing of Jayce's appearances. Yes, she often appears in the large desert area around Shurima these years. Linwen traced her tracks from various nomadic villages. Her method is to retreat while fighting, circling around the void creatures, trying to keep them confined and away from the outside world. After all, if he has to come back to find her later. Haha, who said that Jayce frequently appear in the vast desert around Shurima in these years? With a heart full of frustration, Linwen heads towards the group of fleeing nomads. However, to his surprise, these nomads don't look like typical refugees, unlike the groups Linwen encountered before. The men are robust, the women wear well-made leather clothing, and they carry various weapons. On the back of a trailing wagon, Linwen sees a little girl in low spirits and a man comforting her, presumably her father. Hey, hello, I'm Linwen, a traveling merchant from Belzoun. Linwen approaches, smiling, and starts a conversation with the man. The wagon moves slowly. Doton looks up, glances at Linwen, and immediately says, "We're not planning to buy anything, sir. As you can see, we're on the run. I just wanted to ask what happened to you." Linwen has said this phrase countless times. Linwen tries to remain friendly, speaking with sympathy. "I've seen many fleeing nomads on my way here. They all said they left their homes because they encountered monsters." "They're not wrong," Doton nods. "You should leave this place soon. It's no longer safe here. Because that monster." Before Doton can finish, the little girl beside him exclaims, "Dad, I told you, she's not a monster. She saved me." "Doma, that's because she hasn't turned hungry yet. They've seen her eating people. You saw it too, she can summon those monsters." "That's all a lie. She's not with them, she's with us." "Why won't you believe me, Dad? She saved me and even gave me food and water. Without her, you wouldn't see me again." "Enough, Doma. The man's face turned grim. But Lin, on the side, listens attentively. Finally, I found her. The little girl and her father speaking are unmistakably Jayce. Quickly grabbing a bunch of supplies from his bag, Lin casually places them on the wagon. Without waiting for the man to react, he immediately asks the little girl, Doma, where is she now? What do you want to do? Doma looks at Lin warily. Everyone believes Jayce is a threat, but not Doma. Jayce is a good person, she's incredibly gentle. Doton swallows nervously. Sir, your supplies? I may not afford them. No need to buy. Just answer my question, and they're yours. Okay. Doton nods immediately, but Doma, next to him, grows furious. Dad! You can't do this! Doton covers Doma's mouth, looking at Lin. We saw her to the east of Domo village. Head in that direction. Doton points to a place. After dozens of miles, you'll reach a village. Keep going east for about 7 miles, and you'll find her there. When was this? Yesterday. Lin nods, smiling. All right, they're yours. Turning to walk towards the direction Doton mentioned, Lin can't wait any longer. But a voice from behind stops him in his tracks. He looks at the little girl, who's having a disagreement with her father, and says, Doma, don't worry. Doma looks at Lin, puzzled. Lin smiles and says, I know Jayce, I'm her friend. Upon hearing this, Doma's face transforms from distress to relief. She asks Lin loudly, you know her? Yes, I know her, Lin replies. She's a good person. Lin nods affirmatively, laughing, you're right, she's a good person. 2. Chapter 77-77 Hungry Little Jayce. In the eastern part of Shurima, beneath the yellow sand, a hand covered in dark purple patterns emerges, and a black-haired woman crawls out. Exhausted, she sits on the sandy ground, supporting herself with hands spread apart, uncaring of her somewhat unladylike posture. Cough, cough, cough. After spitting out the sand from her mouth, Jayce stands up, panting heavily with hands on her hips. In just one night, she managed to slay hundreds of void creatures. Although they varied in appearance, all the monsters were terrifying and repulsive, earning no sympathy or goodwill. Just like myself. Jayce knows that, to them, she is no different from the void creatures. However, she is aware that she is not one of them. Gurgle. Her stomach growls, a reminder of hunger after a night of intense battles. Jayce looks around and laughs, saying, haha, a wasteland. If only I had kept a few for myself, those fruits would have lasted me a long time. There's a hint of unhappiness in her voice, but soon she remembers the joyful expression on Doma's face while eating the fruits. Jayce forcefully pats her face, changing her mood. All right, Jayce, you're an adult now. No worries, it's just food. I'll find more. Comforting herself, Jayce takes steps towards where she believes she can find food, hoping for some meat. She recalls the last time she had meat, finding a lost goat. She called out for the owner, but since no one claimed it, the goat became hers. That meal brought her great joy. Slurp. Unintentionally, saliva starts dripping from her mouth. She's just too hungry. Dash. Lin found the village mentioned by Doma's father in just 2 hours. Continuing eastward, he realizes he's approaching a tropical jungle. Would Jayce go to such a place? With this question in mind, Lin searches meticulously. Without a precise direction, he slows down, expanding his senses. As night falls, he spots a distant flicker of fire. Although he can't see the person creating the fire, Lin has an instinctual feeling that it must be Jayce. Cautiously concealing his presence, Lin approaches. When he gets closer, he finally breathes a sigh of relief. Because in front of her, illuminated by the firelight, a woman was crouched on the ground, digging soil. Around her were several large pits. One has to admit, she was lucky tonight, the moon was bright, and there was no wind. Otherwise, these pits would have been filled in no time. What could she be doing? Watching Jayce's actions, feigning disinterest would be a lie. Jayce throws heaps of sand, her movements skilled as if she does it regularly. With her bouncy hair and the way she jumps, Lin can't help but see her as a giant cockroach. Jayce's silhouette has a beautiful curve, but her current actions are far from graceful. Combined with her purple exoskeleton skin and the bouncy movements while digging, Lin thinks the term roach lady fits quite well. Speaking of which, in the league, Jayce has an unflattering nickname, like roach lady, right? / probably in the Chinese league community? I don't play league so I don't know about it / Most creatures tainted by the void take on insect forms. But Jayce gets this nickname probably because of a specific in-game action. Her crazy motion looks absurdly like a giant cockroach, especially when used by players with fast reflexes. Of course, Jayce is not the roach lady. Lin curiously observes Jayce's actions. Until she unearths something. Using a dagger to skewer the find, Jayce, with her back to Lin, sits with her knees pulled up, roasting the item. Is she scavenging for food? Not surprisingly, Jayce is indeed preparing to eat something. It's a scorched and charred scorpion. Seeing Jayce about to consume the creature, Lin hurriedly coughs a couple of times. Even though finding Jayce at night and in such an environment seemed awkward, Lin couldn't help but wonder if he could defeat her. Who? In an instant, Jayce, who was previously roasting something, appeared before Lin, her hand forming ethereal spikes in her tightly clenched fist. Her beautiful pink-purple eyes were filled with vigilance. Wait, I surrender. I'm not a bad guy. Lin raised his hands and surrendered towards Jayce. He had underestimated her. Jayce's agility, now that he could see, might be higher than his own. 600, 700? Her speed was astonishing. After a moment of thought, Lin realized it wasn't surprising. After all, Jayce wasn't an ordinary person, she was a mutant, a champion connected to the void, and there was no way she could be weak. Normal void creatures, several grown men might struggle against a few, but Jayce could handle hundreds on her own. Although it might be guerrilla warfare, it proved Jayce's strength. Who are you? Why are you here? Jayce tilted her head, observing Lin, who was gesturing surrender. Seeing that he seemed quite weak as a human, it eased Jayce's concerns. I'm Lin, from Zaun. I'm a scientist and currently identify as a traveling merchant in Shurima, Lin quickly explained. Jayce indeed appeared to be able to communicate, and Lin had no intention of deceiving her. Scientist and merchant accurately represented his roles in Zaun and Shurima. Zaun. Jayce's expression turned puzzled as she questioned, what's that place? Why haven't I heard of it? Zaun is a city, right on the edge of Shurima. So, you came from another continent? Yes, but not exactly. It's a port city, situated in the middle of two continents. Jayce fell silent for a few seconds. People from other places? No wonder they didn't fear me. Jayce thought to herself. You can leave. Seeing that Lin posed no threat, Jayce decided to lower her hand, and the purple spikes quickly dissipated. She stood there, slightly shorter than Lin, looking at him indifferently. In a cold tone, she continued, anyway, you better keep your distance. I don't like people getting close to me. Lin also lowered his hands, not stepping back but taking a step forward. Upon seeing Jayce's dissatisfied expression and the clicking sound she made, Lin immediately halted, then asked aloud, I just wanted to ask, were you picking up garbage to eat just now? What? Jayce, who had turned around to return to the fire, turned back towards Lin, looking embarrassed and angry. She exclaimed loudly, that's not garbage, it's food, meat. Does that also count as meat? Lin remarked, looking at the fist-sized, charcoal-like thing Jayce had been roasting. While saying this, Lin opened his own bag, revealing various foods prepared by Zevi for him. He took out a bottle of pure water, a palm-sized, fragrant dried beef, and a large, soft wheat bread. Lin looked at Jayce and then smiled. Lin noticed Jayce's eyes never left his hands when he took out the dried meat. However, when he coughed and looked at her, she immediately averted her gaze, pretending nothing had happened. Is that dried meat you have in your hand? Lin clarified. To be precise, it's Fjordian snow beef. What's Fjord? Jayce heard another unfamiliar place name and looked at the stranger in confusion. Fjord is far, far away from Shurima. While Shurima is full of deserts, Fjord is covered in ice and snow. They are completely different. Lin sat down, opened the water, took a sip, and then tore off a piece of the dried meat. The salty and fragrant taste filled his mouth, and Lin showed a happy expression. He had been hungry in the desert before, so this genuine happiness was evident on his face. Swallowing another bite of the soft bread, the sweet aroma of wheat mixed with saliva went into his stomach. The combination of this delicious wheat bread and the snow beef was amazing. Eat. Why aren't you eating your food? Lin looked at the dazed Jayce. With a piece of bread in one hand and dried meat in the other, beside him was a bottle of water. He said, I won't get close to you, I'll just eat by the firelight. Jayce. Looking down at the lump of meat on the short dagger, Jayce pursed her lips. A feeling of grievance surged up in her heart. Clearly, she had said she wouldn't feel grievance because of people anymore. All her family is gone, and her village no longer accepts her. People she meets are afraid of her and avoid her. Despite promising not to let others affect her emotions, why does she feel grievance now? Sitting far away from Lin, Jayce forcefully takes a bite of the overcooked, tough meat, coupled with the soft stickiness of the mucus. This strange texture unintentionally draws her gaze towards Lin. Watching him chew on the beef jerky, Jayce opens her mouth, and her pearly white teeth sink into the scorpion meatball. It's as if, at this moment, the person eating beef is her. Lin certainly feels Jayce's gaze. The intense look is not on his face but is following his hands. To be precise, Jayce is eyeing the Fjordian snow beef jerky. Lin can't help but feel amused. She's really loves to eat. And now, is she trying to pair it with my meal? 9. Chapter 78-78 You must cook it deliciously. Sitting not far from Jayce, Lin notes that she doesn't reject his presence by the campfire. It's challenging to find usable branches for fuel in the vast desert, and Jayce might either fear nighttime predators or simply desire conversation, especially with someone unfamiliar. The aroma of food might be another reason. Regardless, Jayce silently consumes her food, her eyes fixed on Linwen's hands. She assumes he can't see her gaze, given the brightness of the fire. However, Linwen is fully aware of Jayce's intense scrutiny and quickly surrenders. He can't withstand the captivating allure of her striking lilac eyes, despite the peculiar appearance of her carapace. To him, Jayce embodies the perfect champion with her well-proportioned physique and athletic thighs, even if the carapace seems like an odd skin-tight suit. Hello. Linwen opens the conversation, and Jayce shifts her gaze from his hands to his face, watching him warily. What are you doing? She asks. I was thinking, would you like to try some of this? You seem like you really want to eat, Linwen replies. Look, you let me share your fire, and the desert is cold and dark at night without it quite dangerous. So, consider this my way of repaying you. How about it? Jayce blinks, her lilac eyes emitting a bright light. She purses her lips, remaining silent. Just tell me if you want this meat, Linwen straightforwardly asks. Then I'll have it. Jayce immediately drops the scorpion meat in her hand and extends her palm towards Linwen. He notices the carapace covering her hand, dispelling his previous assumption that her palms were hollow. Linwen takes out a bottle of water, a large piece of snow-capped mountain beef jerky, and a soft bread roll from his backpack. Despite the similarities with his dinner, the jerky he hands to Jayce is larger and features intricate patterns with spices, making it quite appetizing. Approaching her, Linwen hands these items to Jayce, then nods and returns to his spot, waiting for something. Ding, the daughter of the void favor towards you has increased. Ding, the daughter of the void favor towards you has significantly increased. Ding, the daughter of the void is curious about you. Ding, the daughter of the void wants to know more about you. Linwen silently watches Jayce eat the jerky. Although her eating manners aren't particularly graceful, they surpass sixths, and Linwen can't help but think she shares a habit with powder. In short, saving the most delicious and anticipated food for last. Linwen contemplates, realizing that Jayce seems even more intriguing to befriend than Graves. Originally, he thought of just becoming familiar with her, but now, activating the card, the success rate of obtaining Jayce's card seems quite high. Jayce eats quickly, devouring the bread and immediately chewing on the dried meat jerky. Though tough, her teeth prove efficient. Despite the dryness, the salty and savory flavor makes it an exceptionally delicious meat. However, chewing has its limits, and after 3 minutes, Jayce feels her jaw starting to ache. Ugh! Staring at the jerky, she resolutely continues to chew. Not fully satisfied, she slows down, savoring the meat. this way of eating, it's okay for a small piece, but it's really hard to endure for a long time. Lin watches Jayce struggle with the jerky and decides to intervene. What did you say? Holding the jerky in both hands, Jayce opens her mouth and mumbles, asking Lin. I mean, I have a better way of eating. Lin thinks for a moment, pretends to rummage in his backpack, but actually reaches for his chrono ring. He takes out a small iron pot and a triangular iron stand, approaching Jayce. Jayce looks at him without a strong reaction and asks, "What are you doing?" "What am I doing? I'm going to cook." "Excuse me, please step aside. I need to set this up." Lin gestures for Jayce to make room. She immediately lifts her buttocks, holding the jerky in her arms, and stands to the side. Jayce subconsciously continues to chew on the jerky, observing Lin setting up the contraption on the campfire. She watches as he places the small pot on the campfire. Jayce doesn't say anything but quietly continues to enjoy the jerky. This is the best meal she has had in a while. So, whatever he wants to do, she lets him. It's just a campfire, and she understands the principle of not biting the hand that feeds. Although this person is mysterious, he is still human, and humans can't pose a threat to her. In this area, it's others who fear her actions, not the other way around. The way you're chewing looks tiring. Actually, using this to make soup can taste quite good. Lin opens another water bottle, pours water into the pot, and then casually tosses the empty bottle into the desert of Shurima. Environmentally friendly? For scavengers, these bottles are a form of wealth. Moreover, considering the multitude of creatures in the Shurima desert, these items degrade in minutes. Environmental protection is a term that may be applicable in Zaun but definitely not in the dictionary of Shurima. The only pity is that there are no more vegetables and seasonings, but in this environment, resources are limited. Lin mutters to himself. When the water in the pot boils, he effortlessly cuts the jerky with a multi-frequency sonic knife and throws it into the boiling water. Then, Lin beckons to Jayce. "What are you doing?" Jayce stands there, her voluptuous figure illuminated by the flickering campfire. She is blissfully unaware of how enticing she appears, completely absorbed in chewing the jerky. "Give it to me, I'll cook it." "This, if it were my own food, I'd refuse, but since it's something you gave me, it's yours to decide." He has the right to decide what to do with this piece of meat. If it were Graves or someone with a more malicious nature, they would have likely swallowed it down in no time, daring to reach out for more from Lin. Jayce, on the other hand, is straightforward and kind. "You must cook it deliciously." Jayce reluctantly hands over the jerky to Lin. Lin takes the whole piece of jerky, showing a wry smile. He notices a row of clear but not neatly aligned tooth marks on the jerky. However, this doesn't imply that Jayce has poorly arranged teeth, quite the opposite, her teeth are beautiful. It simply proves that Jayce is genuinely putting effort into chewing the jerky. Then, there are some glistening stains on it. No need to elaborate on what those stains might be. "Don't worry, back home, I used to cook for my 2 younger sisters. I'm quite an experienced chef." Lin separates the pieces of jerky again, tossing them into the pot under Jayce's concerned gaze. The boiling water steams, cooking the tough jerky. The water in the pot gradually turns from white to a dark brown, indicating that the seasonings on the jerky are dissolving. "Just cook it like this, no need to add too much." "Smell the aroma." Lin looks at the pot and asks. "Oh, I can smell it." Beside him is the girl crouching closer to Lin. She still subconsciously hugs her knees and stares blankly at the small pot. Lin glances at her. Jayce is definitely much easier to please compared to Six and Powder. 6. Chapter 79-79 Straightforward Jayce. In less than 10 minutes, Lin scooped up a pile of jerky with a spoon, poured on the hot broth, and handed the bowl to Jayce. Jayce quickly took the bowl, reaching out to grab the meat, but was immediately stopped by Lin. "Please use this," Lin interrupted, handing her a small silver spoon. "How do you have so many utensils?" Jayce received the small spoon, questioning Lin. "It's quite strange. In the middle of this vast desert, bringing food and water is understandable, even carrying a pot and a bowl and spoon? Are you here for trade, or are you some kind of tourist?" Jayce thinks the man in front of her is really strange. "I told you, I am a traveling merchant. As a merchant, isn't it normal to sell bowls, pots, and such to customers?" Lin explained. But can your little bag really hold so many things? Jayce continued to ask. Hush! That's a secret, Lin winked at her, smiling. Jayce blinked, then lowered her head, starting to eat from her small bowl. Using the spoon, she picked up a piece of boiled beef, the color lightened after boiling, but it still looked quite tough. Putting it into her mouth, Jayce chewed and then. Her previously closed legs started tapping the sand, and a faint smile appeared on her face. Is it delicious? Lin asked with a redundant question. Jayce's small actions and expressions showed that she was in a good mood now. The reason for her good mood, of course, was the bowl of meat in front of her. Thank you, Jayce didn't answer Linwen's question but instead unexpectedly expressed her gratitude. Well, I've already said this is my repayment, you don't need to thank me, Linwen quickly responded. Jayce shook her head, saying, I haven't had warm and delicious food for a long time. You're right, you're a great chef. Linwen. But I'm curious about something. Jayce looked at Linwen. Go on. You claim to be a scientist, then a traveling merchant, and now a chef. Linwen nodded. He actually has more identities. Such as a revolutionary leader, a bookstore employee, and even an underwater investigator. But all of these, obviously, didn't need to be mentioned to Jayce, right? Jayce knows that Linwen's appearance itself is quite strange. This is in line with her character, and she doesn't care. Otherwise, they would have probably had a fight by now. After all, the temperaments of desert dwellers are generally not good, and Linwen understands this well. Jayce is obviously an exception, having a very good temperament. You have so many identities. Seeing that Linwen didn't refute, Jayce continued eating, then said, Aren't you curious about my identity? After all, I look very different from you. Jayce stared at Linwen, looking into his eyes. She was curious about what this man would say. From the outside, her skin that wriggles continuously is constantly indicating to others that she is a monster. While Linwen sits comfortably next to her, sharing a delicious dinner. There's nothing strange about it. I've seen plenty of people like you, Linwen laughed and said. Jayce remained silent. She continued to stare into Linwen's eyes, seeing that he did not evade. It didn't seem like he was lying. Jayce found this intriguing. Really, I haven't lied to you, Linwen raised his hand, then continued, not to mention my home, just in Shurima. There are all kinds of creatures with unique appearances. Have you ever seen a human with a dog's head? Or a giant armadillo that can talk? Jayce blinked. Really? In Shurima, there are humans with dog heads. Not only that, there are even stranger beings, Linwen nodded, then looked at Jayce, saying, and I also want to ask you, is what's on your body clothing or a thin layer of armor? Linwen remembered Jayce's description. The dark purple carapace on Jayce's body is not a layer of armor but her skin. So, that means. Jayce is probably always like that, right? It's my skin. Nice skin, really nice. So beautiful. Jayce, upon hearing this, gave Linwen a strange look. As if remembering something, Jayce suddenly adjusted her sitting posture. While Linwen continued nodding casually. She has a really good figure. Seeing Jayce holding the empty bowl, looking at him cautiously, Linwen smiled. He shifted away from the previous topic about Jayce's skin and, shaking the spoon, said, how about another bowl? This time, Jayce decisively nodded and extended both hands, holding the bowl forward. She said earnestly, thank you. Linwen took the bowl, filled it up again, and also brought her a piece of bread. Dip the bread in the soup, it tastes really good. My sisters often eat like this, Linwen suggested. Jayce tried it and found that, as Linwen said, the soft bread easily absorbed the soup. The warm beef broth made the cold bread feel cozy. Jayce swallowed a few bites of bread, then drank another bowl of soup. Another one. Yes, thank you. Holding the bread, Jayce chewed on the beef. In the firelight, her mouth puffed up, and Linwen saw the fine, short and strange purple patterns on her face swelling, resembling short, thick pickled radishes. Soon, she finished eating again, holding the bowl, eagerly looking at Linwen. Another one. Yes. Until the pot was empty, Jayce had eaten 6 pieces of bread and finished all the beef. Linwen was a bit surprised by Kaa's appetite, but considering that she no longer belonged to the human race, a larger appetite was normal. Finally satisfied after eating, and the pain from her skin subsiding, Kaa burped comfortably, then immediately remembering that there was someone else present. Turning her head, Kaa saw Linwen looking at her with a wry smile. She blinked, then quickly apologized, "Sorry, did I eat too much? You haven't even eaten yet." "It's okay, eating this much is the same for me. Thank you. Actually, I don't usually eat this much. It's just that I've been hungry for too long these days, and your cooking is so delicious, so I ended up eating a bit more," Kaa said seriously. She's not a glutton. When hungry, not only is her stomach uncomfortable, but her body also experiences discomfort and pain. Her skin is affected by hunger too. So, being able to eat a full meal, especially a delicious one, Kaa ate heartily. "You don't need to explain, I really don't mind," Linwen said nonchalantly. "Ding, the daughter of the void's affection level towards you has increased." Kaa nodded, then stood up and walked to the edge of the fire. She looked at Linwen and said, "From now on, Linwen, this pile of fire is yours." "You?" Looking at Kaa, who seemed very serious, Linwen felt a bit speechless. Does Kaa have a straightforward side? 2. Chapter 80-80 Work as my bodyguard. By the campfire in the deep night, Linwen lay on the ground pretending to be asleep. After all, he didn't want Kaa to disappear before he woke up. Kaa, on the other hand, was truly asleep, behind a large rock. Linwen didn't know why she insisted on sleeping behind the rock. In any case, she slept peacefully. Linwen found this situation a bit strange, but he couldn't pinpoint what exactly was odd about it. As the night progressed, the temperature dropped sharply, but fortunately, both Linwen and Kaa were not ordinary people and could withstand it. Kaa's sleeping posture changed from lying on her side with straight legs to curling up into a ball as the night grew colder. As the sun rose, Linwen got up and started stretching. He hadn't actually fallen asleep, he was just pretending. After all, he didn't want Kaa to vanish before he woke up. Kaa had also woken up. She rubbed her face vigorously and then looked at Linwen by the still-burning campfire. Linwen took out a few small items from his backpack: a toothbrush, toothpaste, and a bottle of water. After doing these things, Linwen stood up and started brushing his teeth, drawing Kaa's attention. Curiously, she watched Linwen and asked, "Are you cleaning your teeth?" Healthy teeth is important," Linwen mumbled vaguely. "Can you give me one? I want to try." Kaa hesitated, but ultimately, her feminine nature won. If she could have good tools, she certainly wouldn't want to use wood and specially crafted sour fruit to clean her teeth. For the sake of cleaning her teeth thoroughly, Kaa often endured the discomfort, and afterward, her teeth felt severely acidic, making eating uncomfortable at times. Seeing Linwen brushing his teeth with the bristle brush, Kaa immediately recalled her own childhood. Back then, she would also use a toothbrush that she could hold, dabbing it with some salt or wood ash. However, it was definitely not as nice looking as the one Linwen had in his hands, and it couldn't produce white foam. "Hey? You want to try?" Linwen stopped brushing, holding up the toothbrush with foamy white residue, looking at Kaa in surprise. She, with her beautiful eyes full of curiosity, gazed back at Linwen. Linwen coughed and said, "This is the one I used, but if you don't mind, I won't mind letting you use it." "I mean, do you have another one? I don't want to use something you've used, it's too gross." Linwen. 2 minutes later, in the vast desert of Shurima, two small figures stood together. Sharing a bottle of water, Kaa indulged in the luxury of using water for the first time. She actually used the drinkable water for cleaning her teeth, even dabbing something strange on the toothbrush. "The thing you just used is called toothpaste. The taste might be a bit strange, but don't mind it. We Zaunites like to invent strange things to put in it, even though I warned not to add those things," Linwen explained, spitting out the water from his mouth and then continued, "Its purpose is to clean teeth, and it's much better than the ash and salt the local desert people use. Healthy teeth are essential, not only for people in Piltover and Zaun but also for people throughout Runeterra. Even in Fjord, ordinary people find ways to clean their teeth. Except for some special beings who don't need to clean their teeth, normal people who don't brush their teeth regularly. Open their mouths, and they'll stink to death. This is fun." Kaa imitated Linwen's actions, bending over and brushing her teeth with her right hand, even copying Linwen by showing her front teeth while brushing, although she didn't need to do that. But Linwen, being mischievous, didn't explain when he saw Jayce doing that. He just stood there watching her. "Don't brush for too long, it's good enough," Linwen said as he noticed Jayce had been brushing for 5 minutes, and the toothpaste foam was gone. Seeing her continuing, he felt it might not be a good idea to watch any longer. Linwen didn't want to feel like he was taking advantage of her naivety. Jayce nodded, biting the toothbrush. After finishing, she handed the used toothbrush to Linwen, calmly saying, "Thank you, this is very useful." Looking at the used toothbrush, Linwen quickly said, "You can have this one, and here, take this toothpaste too." Linwen handed Jayce another toothpaste tube. "Aren't these things expensive?" "It's okay. Over here, they might be considered valuable, but where I come from, these are common items, not worth much." "Thank you." Jayce took them, holding them tightly in her hands. With no pockets, she had to hold them this way, one hand for toothpaste and one hand for the toothbrush. It gave her a cute appearance, especially with her purple skin, making her seem less terrifying. Linwen prepared another breakfast. After finishing their meal, the morning arrived. "Where do you plan to go next?" Linwen asked Jayce. She shook her head, indicating she didn't know. She had no home, no acquaintances on this continent. The only thing driving Jayce to survive was her conviction for revenge against the monsters in the underground. The little girl she once was now lived for everyone who couldn't return. The burden on her shoulders was heavy. "I don't know. Is there no place you'd like to go?" Linwen asked. "I have a place I want to go, but they don't want me there now," Jayce said, looking at Linwen. She continued with determination, "Even though you say I'm not strange, they don't see it that way. But it's okay, I can live well on my own." "Alone?" Linwen looked at Jayce, thinking she wasn't truly alone. "Your dad went into the void to find you." Linwen was familiar with the story of Jayce and Kassadin, the father-daughter duo. Jayce was a strong girl, and Kassadin was a great father. However, until Linwen crossed into this world, Jayce didn't know her father was alive, still searching for her, and had become infected by the void like her. But Linwen didn't know how to bring up the topic with Jayce. Fortunately, Jayce didn't notice Linwen's dilemma. She just spoke, "You're a traveling merchant, but I have to tell you some bad news. There are no wealthy people here, and it's very dangerous. Coming here was a wrong decision. But I've been to many places in Shurima. Danger is everywhere on this continent, there's no absolute safe place." Linwen shrugged. Shurima wasn't a friendly place. For ordinary people, there were dangers like wild beasts, bandit groups. For the powerful, there were threats from void creatures, dark mages, and mysterious ascended beings and strange creatures like the monstrous sandworms. There was also the ongoing war between Nakus and Shurima. Yes, Nakus, attempting to dominate the world, had invaded Shurima. After conquering a few territories, they slowed down. For instance, where Linwen was Zaun, that place was now part of Nakus. In any case, after the fall of the once glorious empire with the death of Emperor Azire, Shurima was no longer a safe place. "Alright, since you have nowhere to go, and I plan to explore this area more," Linwen looked at Jayce, and she looked back at him. "You said it's dangerous here, but you're doing well. How about you work as my bodyguard?" "Bodyguard?" Jayce questioned. "Yes, to ensure my safety. Of course, I'll compensate you accordingly." Jayce pursed her lips, she seemed to have guessed what Linwen's compensation would be. Saliva began to involuntarily drool. "Compensation will be food." Linwen pulled out 2 large pieces of beef, then said, "What do you think?" "It's not." Jayce wanted to refuse, but when Linwen pulled out a few more, she quickly said, "It's not like it's not allowed." But she still stated in a queenly manner, "However, here, you have to listen to me. Everything must be under my command." "Of course, you're the local here," Linwen nodded. Jayce's card hadn't activated successfully yet, although the favor ability had increased several times. But considering they had only known each other for a day, there was still some distance to go before activating the card. But as long as food was provided, it shouldn't be too difficult. After all, Jayce loved to eat. 3. Chapter 81, -81 Take Jayce away? On the eastern continent of Shurima, Linn took on the role of an investigator. After getting Kaiase's approval, he approached the void-corrupted land, grabbing a few stones to bring back for further study. Linn had no idea about the source of void power or whether these corrupted stones held any power. After examining the contaminated land, Linn, guided by Kaiase, entered the area where she used to sneak in to steal fruits. These plants are extremely dangerous, they seem to have a life of their own, Kaiase told Linn seriously in the tropical jungle south of Kumungwu. Linn thought, isn't that obvious? This entire jungle is Zyra's embodiment. If you steal fruits in someone's home, they're naturally going to retaliate, even if it's just a symbolic swaying of vines to threaten Kaiase. After all, Linn didn't think Kaiase could be stronger than Zyra. After picking some fruits with Kaiase in the jungle, they continued their journey together. However, Kaiase gradually realized that Linn was heading in the wrong direction. He was going north. Kaiase, of course, noticed, and she prepared herself for the inevitable parting with Linn. Although the days with someone to accompany, talk to, and the days of having enough to eat and drink were good, and even the days of cleanliness were good, Kaiase knew there would always be a day of parting. So she didn't have any special thoughts about it. But in the vicinity of the Kahili River, Linn said a bunch of things to her. This changed Kaiase's original thoughts. She agreed to Linn's request. She thought, maybe she truly didn't like being alone. Before, it was just unavoidable. In the year 984 in Nakas, on November 3, at the port of Belzoun, Linn boarded the ship with his luggage, accompanied by a figure covered in a cloak. I didn't expect you to really agree to my request. Once the ship set sail, Linn leaned against the railing and spoke to the cloaked figure beside him. The sea breeze coming towards them lifted a corner of the cloak, revealing her delicate chin. Her red lips pursed lightly as she spoke, you mentioned wanting to fight against those underground creatures. My strength alone is not enough. I thought about it and realized you were right. I wasn't lying to you. Those things can't be killed, they are manufactured, Linn said earnestly. I know that, she replied. They are endless, and I am more aware of this fact than anyone else. The person next to him was, of course, Kaiase. Well, initially, it was just to activate Kaiase's card, but Linn didn't expect that he would actually take Kaiase away. Science, the science you talked about. What kind of power is it? Kaiase pressed down on her hat to avoid it being blown off by the sea wind, revealing her face. In Belzoun, her appearance was still intimidating. She didn't want to be seen, and she detested being treated as a monster. So, following him, maybe it wasn't just about fighting subterranean creatures but also had something to do with his gaze? He never looked at her with fear, not from the very beginning. As he said, Kaiase thought he might have truly seen too many creatures. It's a kind of power that allows ordinary people to have the ability to kill monsters, Linn affirmed. Kaiase looked at Linn strangely and asked, the power you used that day was also scientific? No, that was magical power. So, is science powerful, or is magic powerful? Now, Linn couldn't come up with an answer. Is magic powerful or is science powerful? This topic is tricky. Science and magic, these two combined, naturally spark controversy, especially in Piltover, where discussions on this are the most intense. As a person from the modern society, Linn is well aware that so-called magic is powerful, but the undeniable power of science is evident in numerous science fiction works. Science, when developed to its extreme, can even possess the ability to destroy stars. Ever heard of the Star Destroyer cannon? One shot, one rune terra continent. Of course, whether there is such advanced technological civilization in the universe is not something Linn is concerned about. While creative imagination is fascinating, delving too deep into it is akin to foolishness. That's the job of the Riot Games designers. It's what the likes of Orlion Soul, Bard, and others need to care about. In any case, the current progress of hextech research in Zaun has reached a commendable level. While it may not be comparable to Piltover, when combined with alchemical technology, the power is enormous. So, Linn could only say to Kaiase, it's not easy to say, they each have their own characteristics. Linn explained further, when I talk about science, it can make an ordinary person fly in the sky at a very fast speed and also have powerful attacks like yours. But magic requires training, and the number of people who can use magic is very limited. Describing it as finding a needle in a haystack would not be an exaggeration. Kaiase nodded. If that's true, then what Lin said about science is indeed very powerful. Jayce hasn't had much contact with science. Her father mentioned it before, saying that the former Shurima Empire was powerful and possessed numerous ancient weapons. However, with the fall of the empire, those powerful weapons were buried under the sands. Are those weapons also a form of science? Jayce didn't know. I have another question, Jayce said, looking at the sea. She felt that her mood was unusually good. Seeing the sea, Jayce was very happy. This was the first time in her 20+ years of life that she saw the sea. It's really vast and boundless, stretching as far as the eye can see. This kind of vastness is hard not to bring joy to a person. Shifting her gaze from the sea to Linwen's face, Jayce asked him, "Are you really just a traveling merchant?" "Of course, you just saw it yourself. Many people around here know me. I've been in Shurima for almost 4 years. But why do I always feel like you found me near that village was not a coincidence?" Linwen evaded Jayce's gaze. "Look at me, please answer my question," Jayce said to Linwen. Now, thinking back, Jayce realized there were significant loopholes in her and Linwen's encounter. After all, it's quite strange for an ordinary person to approach her in the middle of the night, especially considering that Linwen later displayed formidable strength in front of her. He was not the powerless human she had initially imagined, he was powerful, possibly even stronger than herself. So, Jayce wasn't a fool. Who knows? Please answer my question. What would you like to eat tonight? There's a chef on the ship, and we can get something delicious. Answer my question. Jayce was getting a bit angry, her beautiful face showing signs of irritation as she looked up at Linwen. The earlier perception that Jayce was tall was an illusion. In reality, she was about 1.7 meters tall, shorter than Linwen by about half a head. But due to her body proportions, she appeared exceptionally tall, especially with those long legs. Linwen looked up at the sky and murmured, "I heard they have Noxian dishes on this ship, like lamb chops seared with wine. They're fragrant and tender, absolutely delicious. Please." "Oh. Right, the fruit juice we bought in the city we passed by last time. You can have it on this ship too. Do you want to drink alcohol or fruit juice?" "Please. Give me fruit juice." "All right, then Noxian lamb chops plus fruit juice." "Yet." Jayce let out a sigh. He's not willing to answer, let it be. If he doesn't want to, then it's his choice. Anyway, if she's dissatisfied, she can leave on her own. He's not faster than her. Jayce thought like this. 4. Chapter 82, Translator. I see many people getting worried, don't worry, I won't drop this. I will continue translate this fanfic. But also when I reach 100 chapters, I'll be telling y'all a good news and a bad news. So, stay tuned. 20. Chapter 83-82 Hidden Currents. November 4th. Piltover has recently become lively once again. This is because the annual Progress Day is approaching. Over the years, Progress Day in Piltover has become increasingly lively due to the existence of the Hex Gates. People from all over the world, as long as they are wealthy and influential, can easily come to Piltover to participate in the local festival. This day has also become highly anticipated by the people of Piltover. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the council building was bathed in radiant sunlight. Piltover's top elites gathered, commencing their year-end review. This council meeting was different from previous ones, a total of 8 individuals were in attendance. The Pharaoh's family, who often skipped council meetings, was represented by Councilman Pharaohs, a slender middle-aged man, sitting in one of the seats. At the moment, he was addressing the assembly. The issue with the Undercity must be resolved. Some of my factories have been forced to shut down for too long due to them. This isn't just a loss for my Pharaoh's family but also a loss for Piltover. Hextech gems require Hextech crystals, and those factories are the processing points for making Hextech crystals. The production quantity of Hextech crystals is decreasing every year, and it's because of those Zaunites. The Pharaoh's councilman exclaimed loudly. Councilor Pharaohs, the Undercity is no longer what we knew. One of the councilmen shook his head. The people of the Undercity reject our control, they've been autonomous for many years. Who gave them that right? Why can they be autonomous? Councilor Pharaohs, also the head of the Pharaoh's family, Stephen, sneered, covering his mouth with a handkerchief as he coughed a few times. He continued, I've been wanting to say this since last year. How long will you let Zaun develop under our noses? Stephen, Zaun now has weapons, and they are not easy to deal with. Another councilor shook his head at him. Weapons? Don't we have weapons too? Even if Zaunites have weapons, what kind of weapons could they possibly have? I agree with Councillor Feroz's words. The tall and thin senator interjected, you should inquire more. Many people in Piltover are already complaining that, under our control, the air in Piltover is getting more polluted every year, and the environment is deteriorating year by year. How to handle the disposal of industrial waste is indeed a big problem we need to solve. It used to be easy because we could just send the waste into the Undercity. But now they've blocked the pipes, and it's difficult to clear the waste stuck in the pipelines. Mel, upon hearing their words, furrowed her brows. She elegantly raised her hand and then spoke, everyone, although I am an outsider, I grew up in this city since childhood. I've witnessed many honors in this city, and I've always been proud to be a person from Piltover. But, Councillor Metterda, if you have something to say, just say it. We've been too harsh on the people of the Undercity. Mel continued, but in recent years, our relationship with the people of the Undercity has become increasingly tense, placing us in a precarious situation. The discharge of industrial waste is the biggest reason for this. Jayce once told me that in the past, people in Zaun would die every year from lung disease and drinking water with toxic substances. On careful thought, it's actually our fault. We unconditionally discharged industrial wastewater into the Undercity, causing great harm to the people there. Try to look at it from a different perspective. We should be able to understand the anger of the people in the Undercity. Mel looked at everyone present. The councillor who spoke earlier and the overweight senator, who played with his fingers, both slightly turned their heads, avoiding Mel's gaze. Only Stephen stared at her with a deep resentment, his murky eyes filled with dissatisfaction towards Mel. His displeasure with Mel was evident, and he made no effort to hide it. I agree with Councillor Mel, Heimerdinger spoke up, whether it's the upper city or the Undercity, we should be united. Our arrogance has harmed them. As one of the witnesses and founders of this city, I must admit, I've been unfair to the people of the Undercity. Heimerdinger said earnestly. Linwen, Victor, they are Undercity residents, but they are not ignorant. They are not as they are portrayed. Heimerdinger has always been focused on science and inadvertently overlooked many things around him. Injustice is one of them. I also agree with Councillor Mel, Jayce stood up. As he rose, all the eyes in the room turned to him. This contemporary outstanding scientist of Piltover, the pride of the city. Every on Progress Day, Jayce's portrait would be displayed everywhere in Piltover. So, no one could ignore him. Have any of you been to the Undercity? Jayce surveyed everyone, speaking seriously, I have been. When I was still a student, I visited the Undercity. At that time, it was full of haze, poor people piled up on the streets, children a few years old rummaging through garbage bins, and people suffering from diseases begging on the streets. The living conditions they have now are the result of our actions. I hope everyone can take this issue seriously. If you go to the Undercity now, it has changed its appearance in just a few years. So, I believe it's not a time for our arrogance, it's not a time for us to give them charity. Instead, we should actively befriend them. The people of the Undercity have developed, they no longer need our charity. If we continue to maintain this arrogance towards them, it will be a harm to the people of both cities. Jayce thumped his chest, speaking unequivocally. Victor sat beside him. Although he shouldn't attend the council meeting, his current status is unique. Everyone knows that Victor is associated with Jayce, so no one objected to his presence at the meeting. With a ruddy complexion, Victor stood up and elegantly said, Jayce may have been a bit too forward, but I want to tell everyone. As an Undercity resident, I know best how the people of the Undercity view you. Victor, you're from the Undercity. A councillor looked at Victor in astonishment and said with surprise. Upon hearing his words, Victor smiled soundlessly. So many years, and no one knew that he was from the Undercity? Victor nodded at him, whispering softly, yes, I am from the Undercity. Such nonsense. Stephen stood up, loudly interrupting the conversation. He lifted a scepter made of gold, holding it with a sparkling gem, and walked straight out of the meeting room. But when he reached the door, Stephen came back to his senses. He shouted loudly, don't just stand there, what are you waiting for? At his command, two councillors with complicated expressions quickly followed him out, and among these two was the overweight councilor. They rushed to Stephen's side, and then, as Stephen looked coldly at Mel, he grabbed the scepter and pointed it at her. Stephen said meaningfully, "Councilor Metterda, I hope you can think about it again. I think your mother probably wouldn't allow you to show such weakness. I also hope everyone here thinks about it. How are the losses after the shutdown? Moreover, who among you can come up with a better solution? If we don't discharge this sewage downward, how do you plan to deal with it? Are you daring enough to discharge it into the sea?" Having said that, Stephen turned away, walked straight out of the council room with his hands behind his back. 4. Chapter 84-83 Pharaohs. Sir. Once Stephen returned to the mansion, a servant promptly approached, taking the cane and hat handed by Stephen and followed closely behind him. Stephen entered the study, and as the servant placed the hat and cane in their designated spots, Stephen coldly said, "Summon her to see me immediately." The veteran servant, familiar with Stephen's request, nodded and respectfully replied, "Yes, I will do so right away." At the sound of this, Stephen proceeded to his seat, lifting a cup of tea. He gazed out of the window, patiently awaiting her arrival. Outside, with winter approaching, the estate was covered in fallen leaves. Stephen observed this scene with a contemplative gaze. His eyes followed a drifting leaf swaying in the wind until it landed in the estate's drainage channel, eventually flowing into the sewer. These leaves had reached the end of their life cycle, transformed into discarded remnants. Such was their fate. A hint of resentment flickered in Stephen's clouded eyes. What thoughts occupied his mind at that moment were a mystery to those around him. Stephen didn't know how long he had been lost in thought, as the deep voice behind him interrupted his contemplation. Aware of who had arrived, Stephen's initially cold expression gradually softened. When he turned around, a warm smile adorned his face, and his eyes reflected genuine affection for the newcomer. He looked at her and said with a smile, "Dear sister, you've come." "Stephen, what do you want from me?" Standing before Stephen was an exceptionally tall woman, towering over him by at least 3 heads. With legs that appeared powerful and beautiful, her lower legs were equipped with 2 razor-sharp metal blades. She was Camille, the most outstanding spy of the Pharaoh's family. "Sister, we've encountered a major problem." Stephen sighed, looking at Camille as he spoke softly, "During the time you were working on the Hextech weapon modifications, something unexpected happened in the Undercity. It's hard to believe, but the people of the Undercity have begun asserting their autonomy, and they've blocked all the sewage outlets from Piltover to Zaun. Now, the waste gas residues from the factories can't be discharged, and our industries are facing significant constraints. Sister, this is a big problem." Camille silently looked at Stephen, her eyes emitting a dazzling blue light due to her enhanced vision. She was no longer human but a killing machine. "I need you to do something," Stephen said to Camille gently. "Are you willing to help the family?" "I've given everything for the family." Camille spoke calmly. "The current leader in Zaun is named Vander. I need you to capture him. I want to teach him a lesson. However, if he remains stubborn." Stephen smiled and said, "Then I will kill him. When that happens, I'll trouble you to hang his head on the sun gates. Let those people in Zaun see the consequences of independence. Also, give those hypocrites a little shock." Stephen's voice grew colder. They wanted peace and cooperation with Zaun? From the founding of Piltover to the present, the Pharaoh's family had steadily risen to the top of Piltover. Now, they spoke of seeking peace with the people of Zaun? If they achieved peace, whom would the Pharaoh's family exploit? Stephen's expression remained unchanged, maintaining a gentle smile. However, the smile was becoming increasingly cold. Over the years, the Pharaoh's family's spies sent to Zaun had often been captured, beaten, and then thrown back into the upper city. This time would be different. Stephen knew very well that, across the entirety of Piltover, and even into Zaun, there was no place where Camille couldn't reach. She is the most outstanding spy the Pharaoh's family has ever had, and even if Stephen harbors dissatisfaction, he must admit this fact, acknowledging that he might have been the one to become a family spy in the first place. "I understand." Camille turned around, facing away from Stephen, and said, "The time. Let's set it during Progress Day. It's also an evolution between Piltover and Zaun," Stephen said softly. He touched the domino on the table, continuing, "I think you need to carefully consider the plan. He likely has a considerable number of associates." After hearing Stephen's words, Camille didn't say more. She walked straight out. They were siblings by blood, but their relationship had become increasingly strained. However, Camille still followed his orders because he was the head of the pharaoh's family. Standing by the window, two thin hooks popped out from Camille's legs, and soon she disappeared within the pharaoh's family estate. November 5th, Zaun. The academy was bustling lately. Right now, a group of young Zaunites, around 10 years old, chased a white-haired teenager in the corridor. Professor Echo! Professor Echo! Professor Echo! A boy ran the fastest, catching the hem of the teenager's clothes, breathlessly holding on. Cody, what's up? Turning around, the not-so-tall white-haired youth was indeed Echo. He looked at the boy and asked curiously. Shouldn't it be break time now? Progress Day was approaching, and the academy would have vacation for a few days. Echo was getting ready to pack and return to the Undercity. Professor Echo, I have a question I want to ask you. Cody, the boy, looked up at Echo and said loudly, why has Professor Powder been so happy these days? She used to bully us, but today, she gave us candy. Powder. Echo was stunned, evidently not expecting Cody to ask about that. Didn't these kids fear Powder a lot? Well, Echo was quite young himself. He had just turned 16, and the oldest in this group of children seemed to be around 13, while the youngest was 8. So, being called a professor or something like that. Well, there were indeed quite a few talented people in Zaun, but there weren't many suitable for educating children with those radical ideas. To be honest, Echo even thought that Singed wasn't suitable for teaching kids. Singed was undoubtedly formidable, but his educational philosophy was too direct. He was only suitable for teaching geniuses, but were there so many geniuses in the world? Not to mention, if geniuses became commonplace, could they still be called geniuses? Echo bent down, coughed, and pretended to be serious. You're not allowed to inquire about the affairs of teachers. We didn't inquire, Professor Powder said it herself. Yes, Professor Powder gave us candy and cheerfully wished us a happy Progress Day. Echo. Did Zaunites shout Happy Progress Day to each other? Whatever, Powder could indeed do such things. In recent years, Powder had become more and more confident. When her talents were unleashed, and she could help those around her, Powder was no longer the insecure little girl she used to be. She remained cute and naive, but a mischievous streak had emerged from within her. She wasn't the Powder who could only hide behind others for protection during fights. Now, she was the head of weapons department in Zaun. All the formidable weapons in Zaun were designed by her. Professor Powder said her favorite brother is coming back, so she gave us candy to eat. A little girl still held 2 candies in her hand. She opened her hand to show Echo, saying, Look, Echo, it's this candy. Do you want it? Wait, who's coming back? Echo was stunned. I don't know, that's what Professor Powder said. But Echo had already run out from in front of her. Echo ran while revealing a big smile. Big brother Lynn was coming back. Was Professor Echo just smiling? Professor Echo looked really happy. Leaving behind a few little rascals standing in place, the girl who had shown the candy to Echo wore a disappointed expression. She had wanted to give a piece of candy to Echo because he was handsome and the only teacher at Zaun Academy who didn't scold people, both gentle and handsome. However, it seemed like this affection was now out of reach for Echo. 14. Chapter 85-84 He's coming back. Hey! Milo, happy Progress Day! In the Zaun police station, as soon as she arrived, all the Zaun enforcers had left early, leaving only those familiar with her inside. Sevika wore a sheriff's hat and smoked a large cigar, tapping it on the table. She gave Powder a stern look. Around Sevika's waist hung a kinetic blade crafted by her, a powerful weapon made using shimmer and hextech. Mind your manners, Powder. This is a police station, Sevika said discontentedly, patting the table. She was the person Sevika feared the most, mainly because Sevika couldn't quite handle her. The memories of dealing with kids in the past made Sevika a bit uneasy. So what? I'm not a criminal, and you have no authority to arrest me. In the police station, dressed in a stylish denim blue jacket, tight black pants, and jingling boots, she stood there with a mischievous smile, spreading her hands as she continued, I'm here to visit family. Where's my sister? Out again. Powder, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and 6 is usually patrolling the streets at this time. Aren't you aware of that? Milo coughed from the side. Oh, is that so? If it is, just pretend I didn't ask. I might have forgotten, Powder said nonchalantly. Ignoring Sevika's disapproval, Powder continued to sit on the table, facing Sevika. The two locked eyes, one with an annoyed expression and the other smiling mischievously. Are you trying to provoke me? Sevika's mouth twitched. Not at all. It's just that I've missed you so much, Powder said, blinking her big, beautiful eyes. She leaned forward, attempting to hug Sevika's waist, but Sevika quickly avoided it, leaving Powder pouting. I don't particularly miss you, Sevika said coldly, rejecting any attempts at interaction. The expression on Sevika's face clearly conveyed a refusal to communicate. Only I need to miss you, and that's enough, Powder said carefreely. Milo, standing on the side, was in a dilemma. Clearly, he didn't mind Powder coming to see him privately, but he preferred her visits after he finished work, not during his working hours. As for Sevika, her attitude was evident. She wasn't against Powder, but she simply wouldn't engage with her. But Powder understood. Sevika didn't dislike her, Sevika just didn't know how to get along with her. Then the unpleasant topic began. Powder spoke, Milo occasionally added, and Sevika maintained a dead expression. As Powder prepared to leave, she stood by the elevator, one foot in and the other out, hand on the door, saying to Sevika and Milo, well, I have to go now. Sevika visibly relaxed. The little troublemaker, now a force to be reckoned with in Zaun. Not just because she had support from Silko and Vander, but because of who she was, a mischievous troublemaker. Those peculiar but powerful weapons. Sevika found it hard to comprehend. A few years ago, Powder was a little girl playing with dolls in a tavern. Now, she could create powerful magical cannons? Sevika shook her head in disbelief. Then, Powder's voice echoed again. Oh, by the way. Powder jumped up. Remember to tell Six for me. Lynn called me. He said he'd be back within these few days. With that, Powder quickly entered the elevator, vigorously pressing the buttons. When she heard heavy footsteps, and Sevika's face appeared, Powder, with a big laugh, made a V sign, winked playfully, and in a deliberately high-pitched voice, said, bye-bye. Powder. Explain yourself. Who's coming back? When? Sevika shouted loudly. La la la. Powder left only this sound behind. Forget it, Sevika, Milo approached, trying to console her. As someone who had watched them grow up, Sevika was like an elder sister to them. Turning around, Sevika looked at Milo, eye to eye, took a step forward, and with a solemn tone, said, call me Sheriff. Sheriff. Milo quickly responded. But, at the same time, deep inside, he felt both frustrated and a spark of anticipation. He knew who Powder was talking about. Powder would only get this emotional about two people, Six and Linn. Big brother, he's coming back. In Zaun's council hall, Vander had just finished sorting through a stack of documents. He picked out one sheet, tore it to shreds, and chose to ignore the request from Piltover to open the pipelines again. Open the pipelines, and then you'll discharge your waste into Zaun. Vander spat, and beside him, Silko, wearing glasses, was busy organizing diplomatic documents. As if sensing Vander's gaze, Silko spoke, Demacia also wants to establish a hex station. They say they can provide us with some special stones. Wait, Demacia. Vander walked over to Silko, surprised. I remember Demacia as a nation that strictly prohibits magic. Yes. Silko didn't look up but continued organizing the documents. After spending a long time in this role, Silko has lost some of his aggressiveness. The scars on his body are now concealed with some makeup, and Silko no longer looks like the godfather of a criminal organization. Instead, he resembles a refined inventor. Moreover, with improved meals, Silko has gained a bit of weight. But the question of prohibition or unprohibition ultimately boils down to interests, Vander, Silko remarked. After the magic tech loophole, Silko softly said, they call the hex tech phone a technology magic. Technology first, magic second. So, according to them, it's technology they can use, not the magic they need to restrict. Vander nodded, asking, what's your plan? It's not great. While Demacia's anti-magic stones are valuable, we don't have many mages around here. So, rather than the anti-magic stones, I'm more interested in their iron smelting technology. Unfortunately, Vander, they're not willing to sell it to us. Silko set aside the documents, took off his glasses, and massaged his temples. Moreover, we are fostering good relations with Nakos. Building a hextech station for Demacia at this time would damage our friendship with Nakos. Vander fell silent. Knowing Silko well, Vander understood the implied meaning behind Silko's words. So he asked Silko, what if the Demacians are willing to share their iron smelting technology with us? Then they can also be friends of Zaun. Silko looked up, smiling at Vander. Vander shrugged. See, that's Silko for you. In his eyes, there's only Zaun. 2. Chapter 86-85 Kaisa and Piltover. On November 9th, the second day of Piltover's Progress Day, the streets of Piltover remained lively into the late night. Enforcers halted their nocturnal patrols, and the people of Piltover gathered at the plaza on the Constellation Avenue, singing and dancing around a massive bonfire, celebrating in high spirits. Since a while ago, the people you've been seeing might not all be Piltover natives, they could be from various parts of the world. Look up, yes, see that? See the large contraption in the sky? It's called the Hex Gate, a product of the fusion of technology and magic, possessing abilities similar to teleportation. It can bring people from all over the world closer together. For example, if you use the Hex Gate, a round trip might take 3 or 4 days to your home. But think about how long we've traveled. On the streets of the Constellation Avenue, a black-haired young man and a person wearing a hood walked side by side, not particularly standing out in the crowd. The tall and handsome young man, despite his good looks, was not dressed well. Simple white shirt, a slightly grayed wool sweater on top, and black trousers. His attire made him look less affluent, and in Piltover, a poor guy wasn't well received. On the other hand, the person beside him was more conspicuous. In such a festive season, this individual was draped in a grey-black cloak, concealing their entire appearance. Could it be that they're so ugly they can't show their face? It's really bustling. You guys are really wealthy. Under the hood, a pair of pink-purple pupils were filled with admiration as she gazed at everything in Piltover. Grey-black square tiles, streets made of blue stone, adorned with bronze accents and families' golden banners everywhere, beautiful glass windows, and towering eaves. Even in the dark night, they all reflected light. She thought, this is a city that remains as bright at night as during the day. Because there are magical glowing things everywhere. But in her hometown, she didn't know how a better place was like. There, the only source of light at night was fire. Happy Progress Day, my friends. Who wants to buy a flower? Give it to the girl you like. Free barley wine, no need for money, just need your words. Various voices surrounded her. As she listened to those voices, she thought about her hometown, and a sense of loss spread across her face. The initial surprise and excitement in her eyes gradually dissipated. Even though she no longer had a place there, she still considered it her hometown. Her hometown couldn't compare to this place. Here is prosperous. And there are many things she doesn't understand. Kaisa thought to herself. Hey! Happy Progress Day! A person walked up to Kaisa, blocking her path. With Kaisa on guard, he laughed and greeted, "Hello, my friend." Kaisa was momentarily stunned, thinking, "Friend? I don't know you." Startled, she quickly turned to look at Linn. He smiled and casually spoke to the person, "Happy Progress Day, my friend." Then both of them turned their gaze toward Kaisa. Kaisa. It wasn't until Linn squeezed her hand that she hurriedly responded to the person, Happy Progress Day, free." Before she could finish the word friend, the person interrupted her. "Oh, my goodness, you have a nice voice, but unfortunately, you stutter." Hearing Kaisa's voice, the person's eyes lit up briefly, but soon, he looked at Kaisa with a regretful expression. Then, he raised a large cup, shaking it toward Linn proudly, and said, "Hope you have a good time, outsider friend." "I will, thank you." Meanwhile, Kaisa? Under her hood, her face was filled with discontent. What does Progress Day mean? After the person left, Kaisa, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly asked Linn. Her speech was somewhat fast, and her tone was unfriendly. Seeing Kaisa like this, Linn felt a bit amused. He knew very well why Kaisa was upset. Because that person called her stutter. But she wasn't stuttering. It's an important festival in this city. You can think of it as the last day when people celebrate the new year. But there's clearly still December in the year. When I was in Shurima, the villagers would celebrate the new year in the last few days of December. But why do people here celebrate now? That's a good question. Lynn nodded and said to Jayce, I also want to know why Noxians celebrate differently from Piltover. I also want to know if the Fjordians have such a festival. I'm even more curious about the festival days in Demacia. Jayce immediately fell silent. She realized her question was indeed quite foolish. In various villages far from Shurima, there were different customs. Not to mention in a city on the other side of the world, on another continent. What about your home? Is it also so prosperous? Well, you might be disappointed. Before I left, my family was quite poor, but it should be much better now. Lynn said to Jayce. 6 said Vander governed well. After all, with money, everything becomes easier. Jayce asked again, compared to Piltover. That can't be compared at all. Piltover can be said to be the richest city on Runeterra. Lynn felt that it was appropriate to say this. After all, Piltover is not a nation. Compared to a nation, it may not be much, but as a city-state, Piltover's wealth can be envied globally. The pride and arrogance of Piltover residents also stem from this. Because the people of Piltover are really rich. Even though the upper-class citizens in the upper city possess over 90% of the wealth, the commoners in Piltover still live comfortably. Being able to provide a worry-free life for the entire city's population is truly a great accomplishment in troubled times. After leaving the Constellation Avenue, the surroundings remained lively. Children ran around, and seeing this scene, Jayce found it hard to understand. The joys and sorrows between people are like this. Lynn, accustomed to such scenes, found it incredible from Jayce's perspective. You've been leading me for a long time, but where is your home? Below. Below. Jayce didn't understand Lynn's meaning. She looked down at the ground, puzzled, and asked, below Piltover? Yes, beneath Piltover. Lynn nodded. But before we go to Zaun, I need to meet a friend. What about me? You come with me. Jayce. We agreed that I'm following you so that I can learn your knowledge and create powerful scientific weapons. You can't deceive me. I won't deceive you. Once we arrive, you can learn whatever you want. Really? Really? Okay. Jayce nodded, a cool breeze tousling her hair. After witnessing the prosperity of Piltover and the incredibly magical scientific apparatus, she felt relieved. A slight curve appeared at the corner of her mouth as Jayce asked, who are we going to see? We're going to meet a friend of mine, a councilman. Lynn said calmly. Chapter 87-86 Hey. Close to 10 o'clock at night, Jayce visited Victor in the laboratory and then returned to his office. Sitting at a desk covered with files, he examined documents related to Hextech, although these were issues regarding Hextech tariffs and weapon manufacturing requests, topics that Jayce found both tedious and distasteful. Jayce, dedicated to advancing Hextech for the betterment of society, opposed the development of weapons. Despite his repeated objections, he knew that the research on Hextech weapons was already being conducted privately. They hoped Jayce and Victor would participate since they were the foremost experts on Hextech. Jayce had openly expressed his envy of Victor before, and it wasn't just talk. As a councilor, he had been away from hands-on research for a long time. The sound of a Hextech phone interrupted his thoughts. Glancing at the number, Jayce answered, and his stoic expression softened. Yeah, go ahead and sleep. Sure, I have some documents to handle. I doubt I'll get any sleep tonight. Well, tomorrow is another day, and anyway, I can't show up in the streets right now. Yeah, take care of yourself. Good night, Mel. After hanging up the Hextech phone, Jayce rubbed his chin, attempting to focus, but he couldn't. He couldn't shake off the restlessness. Damn it. Jayce's thoughts had drifted away from the pile of documents in front of him. The reason for his agitation became apparent. Councilor Stephen. Even though he and Mel were doing well, Stephen's appearance reignited the desire among the councilors to regain control of Undercity. Among them even includes Caitlyn's mother. Yes, even Mrs. Kiraman, who has always supported him, thinks the same. Why can't each one of you find a compromise instead of just thinking about exploitation? Jayce covered his face, feeling more and more annoyed the more he thought about it. Listening to the sounds outside the window and watching occasional fireworks, Jayce suddenly felt like getting some fresh air. Lost in thought, he found himself on the balcony, his hand pressing against the glass door. Opening the door, Jayce intended to take a break on the balcony. At least relax his mind a bit before going back to work. But as Jayce opened the balcony door, a scene that terrified him unfolded. Two unfamiliar figures appeared on his balcony. One of them, Jayce noticed, had purple arms. Damn, what kind of monster is that? Who are you? Jayce shouted loudly, hoping to attract the attention of the guards. But he was on the 17th floor. And just this afternoon, Jayce had given 2 enforcers a day off, hoping they would enjoy the festival. Okay, with his physical condition, dealing with 2 small thieves shouldn't be too difficult, right? Jayce swallowed hard, but then a question struck him. How did these 2 guys climb up here? Remember, he's on the 17th floor. 17th floor. Is this how you visit friends? Are you sure you're here to see your friend and not to steal something? It's a surprise, okay? I never expected him to move to such a high place. A female voice spoke first. Then, a male voice followed. Listening to the tone, pauses, and enunciation, Jayce suddenly realized something. He stared at the figures ahead, and a thought struck him. Linn. Hey, Jayce, good evening. Walking into the light, rubbing the back of his head, wearing an awkward smile, the person was indeed Linn. While Jayce looked at Linn in shock, the latter, pointing to his own face, said, "What's wrong?" "It's me, Linn." Beside him, Kaa stared at Linn with a skeptical look. Linn, feeling awkward, didn't know how to respond. Suddenly, Jayce took a few steps forward and delivered a powerful punch to Linn's chest. Ouch! Linn remained unharmed, but Jayce, holding his sore fist, bent over in pain. Looking up at Linn angrily, Jayce scolded, "You're a animal." The two locked eyes, and in the next moment, "Ha ha ha! It's not like you don't know the condition of my body. Not bad, you've grown quite a bit, taller than Victor, and almost catching up to me." Both burst into laughter, leaving Kaa bewildered on the side. When the two entered the house, Kaa's eyes widened. From the outside, these mansions already seemed extravagant, but upon entering, Kaa realized the true meaning of luxury. Magnificent and dazzling. Is it okay to describe it this way? In any case, Kaa, like a country bumpkin, looked at every corner of the room. The furniture, walls, lighting, paintings, everything amazed her. "Who's this?" Jayce noticed the sneaky Kaa. "Kaa, my friend." "Oh, a girl. What do you want to say?" Linn looked disdainfully at Jayce. Simultaneously, Linn said to Kaa, "All right, Kaa, you can take off your hat now." Kaa removed the hat, and upon seeing her face, Jayce's eyes widened. He nudged Linn's waist a couple of times, then whispered to Linn, "She's so beautiful." "She's not from Zaun, is she?" "She's from Shurima. Looks like these 4 years weren't wasted, hey, dot." Jayce scrutinized Linn, giving him a meaningful look. "Don't overthink, my friend." Rolling his eyes at Jayce's speechlessness, Linn looked at Kaa, who was still bewildered, and said, "Please find something for her to eat, and then let's talk?" "Okay." After hearing Linn's words, Jayce remained silent for a moment, then opened his hands and said, "Of course, no problem. Linn, I have a lot to talk to you about." "Me too." Linn met Jayce's gaze and said seriously. Actually, sometimes Linn had thoughts. He shouldn't have appeared on that roof back then. He shouldn't have intervened. He should have just stolen the notes and left, because that way, some things wouldn't be so hesitant for Linn. Not like now. Even though meeting Jayce again, they could still chat and laugh. But whether it was Jayce or Linn, there was a certain distance between them. And that invisible barrier. It made them somewhat a bit like strangers to each other. Chapter 88-87 Can we still be friends? Over these years, what have you been up to? I've been doing some things in Shurima, looking for materials, exploring ruins, oh, and making some new friends. That sounds nice, but why haven't you called back on the Hextech phone for so long? You have to know, the place I went to has no signal at all. It's in the depths of the desert, a no man's land, you know. You make it sound like nobody has ever been to Shurima. The two inside were conversing. Outside, Kaa was sitting alone on the balcony chair, enjoying the cool breeze. However, she wasn't discontented. In front of her was an exquisite and incredibly beautiful cake stand, adorned with various colored mini cakes. Each cake had a different texture, some soft, some hard, and some even looked like liquid. Jayce hadn't seen anything like this before. Are these for me to eat? Grabbing one, inspecting left and right, Jayce hesitated to take a bite but ended up yelling toward Lynn inside the room. Because it looked so good. What is this? Is this also something to eat? Do people here not only live well but also eat well? Yes, those are all for you to eat. Lynn shouted back toward the balcony. Hearing Linwen's affirmative answer, Jayce tentatively put the cake into her mouth. The cakes were about half the size of her palm, so Jayce thought she needed to open her mouth wide. Amph. Opening her mouth as wide as possible, she swallowed the cake in one go. Then, Jayce's eyes squinted in an instant. A gulp. Inside the room. Hasn't she ever eaten these things? When Lynn turned around, Jayce asked him in amazement. Lynn nodded, definitely not. You should have noticed. She has some small differences from humans, and her origin is quite complicated. Never mind, I don't want to know about those things. There are already enough troublesome things on my mind. Jayce quickly spoke. I actually wasn't planning to say anything. Lynn shrugged. Under Jayce's threatening gesture, he quickly added, how is Victor doing now? Thanks to you, he's living a very comfortable life now. Jayce reminisced about Victor, saying with a smile, he's in good health now and has no mental stress. He spends his days tinkering with Hextech technology in the lab. Isn't he demanding investments from the big families in Piltover? Lynn teased. With you, the wealthiest person in Zaun, supporting him, does he still need investments from the big families in Piltover? Jayce rolled his eyes. Lynn couldn't deny that and chose not to argue with Jayce's words. The conversation between the two shifted from Shurima to Piltover and then to Zaun. Lynn and Jayce talked a lot for half an hour, showing no signs of stopping. At this moment, a voice came from the balcony. Lynn, I've finished eating. Jayce called from outside. Hearing Jayce's words, Lynn immediately said to Jayce, is there more to eat? Jayce looked surprised, giving Lynn a questioning look. We do have more, but with so many cakes, isn't it enough for her to eat alone? And Lynn, are you sure her statement means she wants more? This is our understanding, Jayce. Over there, help yourself. Following Jayce's gesture, Lynn found the place where the snacks were placed. Don't worry, they're all fresh. They prepare snacks and tea for me every day at the same time, even though I don't like those things. You're living a luxurious councilor's life. Jayce retorted, if you want, you could live as luxuriously as I do. Your wealth is no less than mine. Just for now. Lynn carried the food and went to the balcony, passing by Jayce. He said, after all, the Hextech phone is a one-time purchase for a lifetime, and the energy is not worth much. The construction cost of the base station is just like that. If you really want to make money, your Hexgate would be more profitable. Transportation and trade are big money-making ventures. Hexgate dominates both. As the founder of this technology, Jayce's wealth has reached an immeasurable amount. But now they're dividing up Hexgates, and Hextech phones belong only to you and Zevi. That's true. Lynn pushed open the balcony door and saw Jayce sitting there obediently. When she saw him appear, her gaze didn't focus on Linwen's face but on the plate he was holding. Jayce quickly pointed at her face, asking, all for me. Otherwise. Placing the plate in front of Jayce, Lynn said, we agreed that I would take care of your daily life. But I didn't expect to eat such delicious things. I thought beef jerky was the best thing ever. There are many delicious things. Lynn finished speaking, returned to the room, and closed the balcony door to avoid Jayce overhearing their conversation. Where were we just now? Hextech. Jayce said, making money with Hextech. Lynn touched his face with his index finger and then sat opposite Jayce. How about some wine? What do you want to drink? Jayce got up and went to the liquor cabinet. I can't tell the quality of wine, so any wine will do. Lynn quickly said. Then, looking at Jayce fetching the wine, Lynn said, I remember you don't have a good tolerance for alcohol. I'm not good with others, but it's different with you. I can drink with you even if it costs me my life, drink until I vomit. After handing a bottle of wine to Lynn, Jayce opened the bottle cap and took several big sips. Then he wiped his mouth and looked at Lin, saying, "Just drink directly from the bottle, no problem, right? If you want to drink like that, I have no problem, but are you sure you can handle it?" Lin joked, "I don't want to get the councilor from Piltover drunk. If you mess things up, I might get arrested." "Don't say that, it might really mess things up. But if I don't do this, there are some things I won't be able to ask." After handing Lin a bottle of wine, Jayce opened it, took several big sips, and then wiped his mouth. He looked at Lin and said, "You came to find me, it's definitely not just to see me. You've been avoiding me for several years and now you appear in front of me." Lin put away his previous smile. He's back, and some things need to be resolved thoroughly. He looked at Jayce and said, "The method to create hextech gems, I stole it from you and gave it to Zaun." "I know that," Jayce shook his head. He didn't care about the manufacturing process of hextech gems. This is now entirely under the control of the Pharaoh's family, and Jayce can't intervene, even though it was originally his creation. And this is all about capital. What I want to know more is... Jayce stared into Linwen's eyes and asked seriously, "Linwen, were you here to meet me for this purpose from the beginning you appeared in front of me?" Upon hearing Jayce's words, Linwen immediately shook his head and said, "No, believe me, Jayce, that was really just an accident. I just wanted to see if there was anything useful. Unexpectedly, I encountered you and Victor, and after seeing Victor, my focus changed. So, the group of kids who stole from my lab back then, you actually know them." Jayce took another sip. Linwen remained silent for a moment, also taking a sip of his drink, and said, "They are my brothers and sisters." "No wonder." There was a long, long silence. "How do you see me?" Jayce asked after a while. Linwen looked at Jayce, "We are brothers." "Brothers?" Jayce self-mockingly smiled, saying, "But what you did doesn't seem like something a brother should do." "Sorry. No need to apologize. If it were before, I would definitely be angry with you, but now I understand why you did this." "Positions, hey." Jayce looked at Linwen and whispered, "What we do has no right or wrong. If I were you, maybe I would want to change everything too." Linwen remained silent, not saying anything. To Jayce, Linwen only felt guilt. Because Jayce had really treated him as a brother. Looking at the silent Linwen, Jayce suddenly said, "But you're back, so can we still be friends in the future?" Chapter 89-88 Not just a human. Linwen, Zaun, and Piltover can improve together. With you back, we can change the relationship between the two cities. Jayce, it's not that simple. I know this isn't a simple matter. But in the years you weren't in Piltover, I've been working hard for this." Jayce placed the bottle on the glass table, looking into Linwen's eyes, and said seriously, "When necessary, I've even attempted to use force. But it didn't work. Linwen, now I'm the only one making an effort. Victor can't help me, Mel doesn't assist me, and Professor Heimerdinger is not interested in politics. But you can help me. As long as you can get Zaun to sign the alliance, I'll submit it to the council. Mel will support me, Heimerdinger will too, and Ms. Kiraman, we can give it a try. By then, we'll have at least 4s." Linwen looked at the tabletop in silence, and with Jayce's excitement, the table trembled continuously. After listening to Jayce's words, it took a long time before Linwen spoke, his tone tinged with helplessness. Linwen said softly, "Jayce, I know you mean well, and I believe you genuinely want Zaun and Piltover to get along. I know all these things, Jayce, I know. But have you ever thought about one thing?" Linwen raised his eyes and looked at Jayce. He did feel sorry for Jayce. Jayce treated him as a brother, yet Linwen approached him to obtain hextech. During the 4 years away from Zaun, Linwen did indeed avoid Jayce, and now, coming back, he had certain things he had to do. Linwen's tone became somewhat heavy, and he wanted to stop himself from saying what he was about to say. But he couldn't succeed. This was something he had wanted to say for a long time. To say it to all the people of Piltover. It's time for you to listen to the voice of the people of Zaun. In the end, Linwen still spoke to Jayce. "So, alcohol is really not a good thing. It makes people inexplicably say things that shouldn't be said. Even when you know that saying them will hurt the other person, they still come out spontaneously. Until now, did you really think Zaun wanted peace with you? Did you believe Zaun was begging you? Until now, did you still think Zaun is parasitic under Piltover? Jayce, we are not pitiful creatures. Lynn locked eyes with Jayce. Now, it's not Zaun begging Piltover, it's time for Piltover to open its ears and listen to Zaun's voice. Jayce looked at Lynn in silence, his previous excitement turned into powerlessness. He realized that the Lynn in front of him suddenly became unfamiliar. Yes, Jayce is a councilor. But Lynn led the people of Black Ally when he was 14. At 16, he inherited Vander's banner and truly unified Zaun. Jayce is a confident and arrogant upper city councilor, but Lynn also has the determination and resilience of a undercity citizen. Now, first and foremost, Lynn is from Zaun, and then he is friends with Councilor Jayce Tallis of Piltover. Have you not noticed that until now, you've always carried a hint of arrogance when you said you wanted to change the relationship between our two cities? Lynn sighed. I have been changing, after getting to know you and Victor, I have been changing myself. Lynn shook his head. Jayce wanted to say something, but in the end, he fell silent. He actually knew the outcome early on. This inevitable conflict, perhaps not a battle, but the day of conflict eruption between the two cities was bound to come. Jayce is a smart man. Over the years, he has been involved in politics. Of course, he knows what the 4 years of Lynn's disappearance signify. On one side, Lynn protected him from parliamentary harassment, and on the other side, Lynn did not give Jayce a chance to change his mind. Jayce knew early on that when Lynn returned to Zaun, the relationship between the two cities would officially change. So he said to Lynn that day, "Can we still be friends in the future?" But Jayce raised his head, and Lynn said seriously, "We won't involve innocent people. When I say we, I mean you and me. The real cause of the relationship between Piltover Zaun is not you, not me, but them, the big families, the upper class. Jayce, we will never be enemies, you're my brother. Lynn, I hate them too. They manipulate me in every possible way, but you have to understand, without them, Piltover would descend into chaos," Jayce spoke up. Several major families control the economic lifeline of Piltover, especially the Pharaoh's family. Lynn remained silent. Piltover in chaos? Of course, it would be chaotic, but why would Lynn care? He only cares about Zaun now. Jayce also understood Lynn's intention. Not speaking is Lynn's answer. Jayce picked up the wine, shook it towards Lynn, and said with a bitter smile, "You say we won't be enemies, but in the end, we have to stand on opposite sides. You can go ahead and try to change their minds. If they are willing to apologize to Zaun, sign a treaty agreeing to Zaun's independence, stop discharging waste into Zaun, and open the hex gates for Zaun to use, then I can promise on behalf of Vander. This way, there can be genuine harmony and coexistence." Are you kidding me? Your conditions are too demanding, they will never agree. Give it a try. Try my ass. Jayce looked at Lynn in silence and said, "I thought you had changed earlier, but now you're back to the same. You're still shameless." "It's not being shameless," Lynn said seriously. "I'm serious, I'm not joking. Piltover can't defeat Zaun. If it weren't for certain reasons, I would have dealt with those people long ago. I'll take it as you joking again. Human strength is limited, and they are secretly researching hextech weapons. The power of hextech is not to be underestimated. Is human strength limited?" Lynn muttered to himself. "Yes, human strength is limited. But I'm not just a human. Not only am I not human, but the girl sitting on the balcony eating, she's not human either." For Lynn, just Jayce alone could easily solve Piltover's problems. Although she might get injured, even hit by powerful weapons, there's a chance Jayce might die, but before that happens, Jayce can cause devastating damage to Piltover. If Jayce wants, she can destroy Piltover in an instant. But Jayce obviously doesn't believe. Well, Lynn is too lazy to explain. Chapter 90-89 Embarrassing. After this conversation, both Lynn and Jayce were in a somewhat sour mood. Jayce was smiling, but it was a forced smile, and so was Lynn. As they continued to chat about mundane matters of life, neither of them seemed enthusiastic. When Jayce spoke up again, Jayce indicated that he couldn't drink any more, and Lynn politely took Jayce with him as they left. Jayce didn't escort Lynn. After Lynn left, Jayce sat in his seat, lying in the chair, looking at the table, feeling a bit intoxicated. He couldn't organize the documents in front of him now, but those people would demand them tomorrow. He silently looked at the pile of papers on the table, not knowing what he was thinking. Fingers rubbed the bandage on his left wrist, touching the gem embedded in it. A mage he encountered in his childhood gave him a gem, and it was because of that gem that Jayce developed a fascination with magic. Jayce sat there, touching the gem, and this action lasted for 2 hours. It wasn't until the fireworks of midnight sounded, marking the 3rd day of Progress Day, that Jayce snapped out of it. He looked outside the window, and Piltover at night was still so beautiful. Staring out the window, Jayce muttered to himself, "You have your stance. I have mine." Opening the door, Jayce walked out. He was going to do something, a childhood dream. "You're already back home, but your mood doesn't seem great." On the streets of Zaun, Jayce removed her cloak, covering her nose with her hand. Jayce, with her keen sense of smell, disliked the scent of Zaun. The air was filled with various pungent odors, and the air quality was worrisome, even worse than where she came from. The bustling city above ground was the same, the air carried a strange smell. But when she was up there, Jayce could tolerate it. However, the smell down here made it a bit unbearable for Jayce. "Somewhat. You don't like him?" "No, quite the opposite. I really like him, he's like my brother." "Why were you upset after seeing him?" Jayce curiously asked. When she first encountered those people, she was happy, but being chased away as a monster saddened Jayce. However, she didn't blame them, they simply didn't understand. Meeting familiar faces is usually a good thing, but Linwen's current situation seemed off. Anyway, if he didn't speak to her with a cheerful tone, Jayce felt a bit uneasy. Linwen took a deep breath, inhaling the air of Zaun, then exhaled a long sigh, as if trying to release all his troubles. Looking at the transformed Zaun, he said to Jayce, "Because I almost lost a brother." "Is it because of that Hextech thing?" "He actually doesn't care about Hextech. He cares about the city above our head." Linwen shrugged, finding it unexpectedly relaxing to talk to Jayce, who knew nothing and, until recently, scavenged for food in the sands of Shurima. Because Jayce didn't understand everything, Linwen could easily explain things to her. "Are you going to attack that city?" "Hey? How did you know?" "I heard it. I was listening when you talked to him. Although I didn't understand many things, I understood your conversation with him and the relationship between Zaun and Piltover." Linwen narrowed his eyes, stopped walking, and Jayce walked in front of him, turning around to look at him curiously. "Well, tell me what you heard from our conversation. What did you understand?" Linwen asked Jayce curiously. Jayce, with her tragic story, was a bit heartbreaking, but she was also a strong girl who didn't cry or make a fuss after the tragedy. Linwen found her to be quite likable. However, after getting to know Jayce for about a month, Linwen realized she was no different from a normal girl. Remove the purple carapace, and she's an adult Shuriman girl. Shuriman girls are passionate, with some tomboyish traits, but that's normal. No, wait a minute, Jayce is more gluttonous than normal girls. This is probably due to her being hungry too many times. After all, Jayce would eat anything before when she survived by scavenging in the desert. "Isn't it simple?" Jayce said confidently, "You are from Zaun, he is from Piltover, and the relationship between Zaun and Piltover is not good right now." "How do you know that the relationship between Zaun and Piltover is not good?" "Fool, if my home was being pressed down, I would also argue with others," Jayce said, crossing her arms. This statement showed her mature understanding since childhood, helping with household chores and even herding sheep. When she herded sheep, if she encountered other people's sheep, Jayce would intentionally drive away those sheep, allowing her family's sheep to eat better grass, grow bigger and fatter, making them tastier to eat later. In short, being good to oneself is the most correct thing to do. Zaun is pressed down by Piltover, and all the good things belong to Piltover, so it's normal for Zaun not to like Piltover. Linwen laughed. Jayce's words were not entirely on point, but they indeed reflected one of the conflicts between Zaun and Piltover. Jayce looked at Linwen and smiled, so she confidently continued, "Because we are going to war, the relationship between you and him has become tense, right?" "You're quite smart." "Thank you for the praise," Jayce responded happily, but then immediately said, "But, Linwen, where are we going now?" "Just find a random alley." "What are you thinking? There are plenty of places to stay." Stay at your brother or sister's house. Linwen considered the time and shook his head, saying, not now. Apart from it being too late to visit them, I don't even know where they live in the middle levels. I can't go door to door, right? Use your square box. Jayce blinked, and Linwen knew she was referring to the Hextech phone. Well, it's too late now. Oh. Jayce nodded and walked up to Linwen, looking up at him. She whispered, then hurry up and find a place. You promised me, basic necessities. Jayce hesitated and mumbled, I haven't slept on a bed for a long time. At the tavern in Shurima, didn't you sleep there? I mean, a soft bed. I just saw it, your friend's room has a soft bed. Jayce said with a hint of envy. Bed? That's Jayce's office. Where did the bed come from? Linwen looked puzzled. Aha! It's that specially made bed. When you sit on it, it sinks down after a while. Jayce blinked her big eyes and added, I want to sleep on that too. Linwen stared at Jayce in silence. After a while, he spoke, Jayce, try to speak less when you meet people. Just be a beautiful girl who doesn't talk much. Jayce blushed at first, she never thought of herself as a beautiful girl. Before coming here, in Shurima, no one said she was pretty, they all called her a monster. Now, Linwen was calling her beautiful. But soon, Jayce seized the key to the problem and questioned Linwen, why? Didn't you say my appearance in Zaun is not strange? Embarrassing. Are you lying to me? You clearly said I'm not much different from normal people here. I meant you're embarrassing to talk to. Linwen pushed Jayce away with his hand, strode forward, and growled, it's a damn chair. Chapter 91-90 Reunion. Zaun's Grand Avenue stands tall over Zaun's dark alleys, serving as the commercial hub for these shady streets. Countless shops line this street, but the largest one, spanning several hundred square meters and consisting of 2 floors, is a massive iron building. The neon sign above, turned off for the night, bears the name of the store. The store is named Zoran's Emporium. Zoran's Emporium can be considered the largest store in present-day Zaun, whether in the mid-layer or the sump. It sells a variety of goods, and the shopkeeper, a frail old man, even offers affordable repairs for mechanical tools, though only when he's in a good mood. Now, the question arises. In a chaotic place like Zaun, having such a store with an elderly, feeble man as the owner, could it be dangerous? Certainly not. Thanks to the efforts of the recently established Zaun enforcers, the order has improved significantly. While there are still a few with occupational diseases, they dare not harbor ill intentions towards Zoran's Emporium. Simultaneously, even the drunkards of Zaun dare not cause trouble at Zoran's Emporium. It is safe to say that the store is the safest place on this street. After all, the store's owner is called Zoran. He's the kind of person who can point at Vander, the father of Zaun, on the street and scold him fiercely. Even the recently notorious enforcer of the Undercity, 6, when she sees him, respectfully takes off her hat and greets him with a polite Uncle Zoran. But Zoran's attitude towards 6 is different from how he treats Vander. He warmly receives 6, greets her kindly, and even offers her water and snacks from the store. You see, he's known for being stingy, a little old man who has a knack for counting every coin. As for why he behaves this way towards 6, well, who knows? And on the 9th of November, the 3rd day of Progress Day, in the early morning hours, right now, outside Zoran's Emporium, 2 figures are standing surreptitiously. One of the taller guy let out a sigh and whispered, I never expected this. I've only been away for a few years, and Zoran has turned the small shop into a big emporium. The changes are truly significant. Most of Linwen's frustrations were cleared away. After meeting and conversing with Jayce, Linwen became more certain about his own convictions. Despite the irritations, accompanied by Jayce's presence, Linwen had shed many of his worries. Now, upon seeing the words Zoran's Emporium, all his troubles were cast aside. He's back. Back to his home. Where Zoran is, that's his home. However, an untimely voice interrupted Linwen's reflections. Wait, are we going to climb walls again? Sneak in through the window. Beside Linwen, a slightly shorter girl with black hair stared at his profile, making an odd remark, is this really your home? What if you're deceiving me again? Linwen pushed Jayce aside with a sigh and said, don't be silly. I'm still confirming, all right. Jayce stepped back, and their current relationship was just like that, partners, comrades, and friends. Despite knowing each other for only a month, Lynn had always intended to get close to Jayce, and she, eager for conversation after the difficult days talking to rocks in Shurima, naturally welcomed Lynn's company. Moreover, after facing void creatures together, even though Jayce didn't say it explicitly, she had started to trust Lynn. To reiterate, Jayce was a kind, strong young woman. Her kindness was innate. Even though people disliked her, ostracized her, she was still willing to sacrifice herself for those who had harmed her. Jayce, an incredibly good woman. However, at this moment, this good woman was deeply suspicious of Lynn. Lynn, I deeply doubt you now, I super duper doubt you. I suspect that you were lying to me before. Do you really have the ability to make my life better? Standing next to Lynn, Jayce looked at him with perplexity, her eyes tinged with a bit of disdain. Oh boy, does this look like we're about to steal again? What? Me stealing sheep? That's not stealing. I asked, and if no one wants it, then it's mine. Anyway, the reason Jayce suspects Lynn is, who sneaks around like a thief when visiting a friend or returning home. Is there any logic in that? So, what else could it be if not thieving? Lynn, tell me, you're actually a very annoying person, right? Lynn looked up at the wall, his mind racing, then replied to Jayce, if we interpret your words differently, does it mean that you used to really like me? No way. Fuck. Don't kick. That hurts. Lynn let out a cry and squatted down, rubbing his shin vigorously. Jayce's strength was around 300, and without control, her full force kick could have broken someone else's leg, or worse, turned it into minced meat. Jayce, infected by the void, was a mutant. Looking up at Jayce, the instigator immediately put on an innocent act. Just as Lynn was about to continue, the lights on the second floor of Zoran's emporium suddenly lit up. Bright lights beamed down, illuminating Lynn's head. Next to the light source, a thin old man in pajamas was holding a large gun, glaring menacingly at the ground below and simultaneously shouting, "What kind of dog crap is this? Don't you know where this is? Hurry up and get lost. I can forgive you now, but if you ignore my warning, I'll put 2 holes in you right away." Jayce quickly raised both hands, lifting her head to make a surrendering gesture, blinking innocently. Lynn stared blankly at Jayce. "What's with you? He has a gun, and I recognize guns." Jayce hurriedly explained, but her hands were slowly lowering. The atmosphere became silent as Lynn and Jayce locked eyes. The latter slowly turned her head. "What are you looking at?" Jayce is also very embarrassed. What can she do about this reflex action? In Shurima, they had guns too, and she knew from a young age that guns were powerful weapons. Years of common sense told Jayce that when facing a gun, she had to make this gesture. But she's not a human anymore. "You're quite something," Lynn murmured. "Can bullets break Jayce's skin? It's probably difficult." "Well, it's my fault. I shouldn't be too harsh on her. After all, she's an ignorant country girl, the one who mistakes a recliner chair for a soft bed. So being a bit out of line is normal." "Look up, didn't you hear me talking?" the old man above scolded. But the next moment, he froze. Lynn raised his head, smiling at the old Zoran standing on the second-floor balcony, waving and saying, "Old man, why are you so cranky not sleeping at this late hour?" Zoran's lips moved, the hand holding the gun lowered, and his cloudy eyes lit up. "You little brat." Chapter 92-91 Love, it's something easy to recognize. In the second-floor living room of Zoran's store, Lynn and Jayce sat together, facing the now calmer old Zoran. Zoran served 2 bowls of instant noodles and placed them on the table. Lynn didn't eat, he wasn't hungry. On the other hand, Jayce, who had eaten a lot at Jayce's place earlier, eagerly slurped the noodles. "Eat up, hey? Ya brat, why aren't you eating?" Zoran looked at Lynn, who was staring at him, got up, and gave a forceful pat on Lynn's head. Then he exclaimed, "It's late, what else do you want to eat? Just make do with the noodles. Eating noodles is a delightful thing, you know." "I'm not hungry, and I think you have something on your mind," Lynn pushed away the noodles. Beside him, Jayce's eyes immediately lit up. However, she remembered what Lynn had told her to speak less. So she continued eating her own noodles, occasionally glancing at Linwen's untouched bowl. "1 bowl of noodles, how much is it?" With this small bowl, Jayce could eat 10. She's a super eater. As for Linwen, he had noticed that the old man's gaze had been strange since earlier, observing Jayce from head to toe with a puzzled yet appreciative expression. What's the matter with old Zoran? By the way, Jayce's purple skin, in old Zoran's eyes, wasn't a big deal. Although her skin was purple and looked like a layer of armor, she was, after all, a girl, a very beautiful girl. In the ghostly place of Zaun, where people have mechanical hands, mechanical arms, mechanical legs, and even bodies entirely replaced by machinery, leaving only the brain, peculiar things are quite common. Due to constant pollution from waste gas and sewage, some children even appear as monsters from birth. Therefore, Zoran didn't mind Jayce's purple skin. Linwen pulled Zoran aside and whispered, "Her name is Jayce, and I brought her from Shurima. Her situation is quite special. She's alone, so she'll be staying with us from now on." Old Zoran nodded, watching Jayce eating noodles. The more he looked, the more he liked her. Being able to eat is a blessing. As if reminded of something, Zoran coughed, signaling Jayce to continue eating. Then, he grabbed Linwen and pulled him aside near the stairs. In a hushed tone, Zoran asked, "What are you implying now?" "What do you mean by implying?" Linwen was momentarily puzzled, tilting his head in confusion. Zoran first glanced at Jayce, who was eating in front of him, and then said to Linwen, "Except for those 2 girls who used to follow you around, this is the first time you've brought a girl home." Is she what?" Zoran chuckled and raised his eyebrows. Linwen, looking at the lecherous Zoran, was speechless. He understood what Zoran meant, but Jayce didn't. "Come on, tell me, is it? If so, I need to get prepared," Zoran insisted. "What are you thinking? I'm just friends with her. It's not like..." "Do you mean you want to prepare a dowry or something?" Linwen looked at Zoran in disbelief. Zoran smacked his lips, "You're already in your 20s, and you're doing such dangerous things. If anything happens to you, who will take care of me in my old age? So, prepare to bring a little Linwen back for me. You've got to be kidding me." Linwen stared at Zoran in disbelief. "If there were a little Linwen, and I was gone, you think he'd take care of you for how many years?" "That's fine, I'll take care of him. So, when are you bringing me a little Linwen?" Zoran opened his mouth, saying it seriously. Linwen was left speechless, thinking, "You, old man. Living a good life makes people unstable, hey?" Linwen felt extremely helpless, looking at Zoran, and said, "Hold on, I heard the meaning in your words earlier. Jayce, let's put that aside for now. I'm curious if you used to look at Six and Powder the same way." Linwen suddenly realized that Zoran was acting strange. "What else? I didn't let you interact with Vander or play with his kids. But you kept going to his tavern. Wasn't it because of those 2 girls?" Zoran initially said it disdainfully but then chuckled, saying, "But you have a good eye, brat. Those 2 girls are now exceptionally beautiful, especially the younger one. In the past, she had a bit of buck teeth, but now she has grown to be quite beautiful." "Buck teeth? Are you talking about Powder?" Talking about Powder's childhood, she indeed had some protruding teeth during her tooth replacement phase. She had a habit of licking, causing her teeth to grow unevenly. After Linwen scolded her a few times, she became more obedient. Once she got her permanent teeth, they became straight. Powder wasn't a buck-toothed girl at all. How adorable! Who cares about buck teeth? Anyway, don't overthink it. She and I are just friends, Linwen insisted. Zoran still wanted to say something, but Linwen had already returned. When Linwen returned, he noticed his bowl was empty, with some soup left. He looked at Jayce, who was using her arm to shield her bowl, trying to prevent Linwen from seeing. Even so, Linwen saw at Jayce's now filled bowl. "You?" Jayce immediately said, "Didn't you say you weren't eating?" "When did I say I'm not eating? I saw you leave." "Forget it. Eat, eat." Linwen sighed and sat down next to her. This was the reality of having money. Otherwise, he really couldn't afford it. Jayce was just too good at eating. Being able to eat was not the only issue, the problem was she enjoyed eating. After Jayce finished 2 bowls of noodles and went to brush her teeth with the toothpaste and toothbrush Linwen gave her, Zoran also came out of his room. The bed is made. Zoran, holding a cup of tea, sat in front of Lynn. Is it a soft bed? When are you going to sleep in that thing again? It's not me, it's her. I don't have that kind of thing here, but adding some extra padding should be soft enough. Is the bed big enough? What do you mean? Do you want to sleep with her? Lynn was speechless. No, Zoran, what's wrong with you now? Lynn looked at the disrespectful old man and said, it's her who wants to sleep in a big and soft bed because she has never slept in one before. So, I promised to let her sleep in a good, big bed. Understand? Understood. Zoran nodded and then said, big enough, it's a bed that's 1.5 meters wide, quite big, right? Lynn nodded. Got it. In the midst of the conversation, Lynn asked, by the way, where does Powder live now? That girl is living in the middle layer of the city, Zoran replied after taking a sip of tea. Then he added, by the way, brat, what are your plans? What plans? Powder and Six, I can tell, the younger one is easily jealous. They're both my sisters, Zoran. Lynn was genuinely annoyed. He didn't want to continue the conversation with Zoran. Seeing Lynn heading towards his room, Zoran clicked his tongue. Then he muttered, I don't know about the older one, but the younger one doesn't see you as a real brother, you brat, you might be in for it tomorrow. After guiding Kaysa to her dedicated room, Zoran finally returned to his own room. Sitting on the bed, Zoran grinned. His son was back. And he brought a beautiful girl, albeit a bit peculiar. Zoran could accept that. But, thinking about what would happen to Lynn tomorrow, Zoran couldn't help but chuckle. Love, it's something easy to recognize. The girl with blue hair likes him. Yes, Powder likes Lynn. Chapter 93-92 Can't wait. The third day of Progress Day. In the early morning, in a room in the middle layer of Zaun, Six rubbed her pink disheveled hair and opened her eyes with displeasure. Lying on her side, she noticed several long strands of hair, clearly not her own in color or length. This was Powder's hair. Her hair had grown to over 1 meter in length, imagining what it felt like to sleep with someone like that. Every time Six moved slightly at night, she felt her face itching. A bunch of fragrant hair covered her face, like a silky blanket. Six's expression suddenly became impatient, with a hint of irritation in her eyes. This impatience stemmed from being woken up. She just wanted to sleep. The sound of punching sandbags not far away was annoying. Six was already frustrated because it is her rare day off. Checking the time, her frustration increased. It was only 6 in the morning. Six covered her face with a pillow, making buzzing noises. Powder, it's only 6 in the morning. Thud. Thud. The barefoot girl tied her hair into a messy bundle. Viewed from behind, her head seemed unusually large, like she was wearing a blue-green hat. She answered loudly, I know. Powder, Progress Day hasn't ended yet, he'll be back. I know. Despite saying that, the sound of punching sandbags continued unabated. Six, for the first time, regretted having the sandbag in the bedroom. Finally, Six couldn't take it anymore. She sat up, walked towards Powder, and shouted loudly, I want to sleep. Sleep. Powder, today is your sister's day off. You sleep, I didn't say you couldn't. Powder punched the sandbag relentlessly. She was angry. The last day of Progress Day. But why hasn't he come back yet? He said he would be back on Progress Day. She was dissatisfied, very dissatisfied. However, when Six couldn't take it anymore, got up from bed cracking her knuckles, and walked towards her, Powder wisely chose to stop. She timidly took 2 steps back, her hands previously pounding the sandbag now behind her back, twisting and turning. Powder looked at Six, anxious. I'm done. You sleep or, do you want breakfast? I can make it. It seemed like Powder really got on Six's nerves. I don't want breakfast. I also want to punch. I don't want to punch the sandbag. Powder. Six. Punching sandbags doesn't give the same satisfaction as punching a person, right? You agree, right? Grabbing the trying to slip away Powder, Six pressed her down forcefully, closing in. Smirking, she said, Powder. Hey, Powder, why the long face? In the afternoon, Powder wandered around the Undercity, and those who knew her greeted her from a distance. Under the duckbill cap, Powder snorted through her nose in response. Her mood was indeed not good. Entering a tavern that was open during the day, playing soothing music, the short and chubby owner, Benzo, greeted her with a cheerful smile. Seeing Powder's pouting mouth, the pressed-down hat, and hands in her pockets, Benzo immediately sensed that Powder wasn't in a good mood. He had seen this little girl grow up. "What's wrong today? You look so unhappy." The owner of the White Dove Tavern greeted his little customer. Yes, Benzo changed careers. He went from being a grocery store owner to a tavern owner. Well, since Zoran became the biggest shop owner now. But Benzo enjoyed this new venture. He had always envied Vander. Now, there was no more Last Drop Tavern, but the White Dove Tavern had emerged. "Yeah, I want a glass of iced black tea, add 2 lemons, please." Powder sat on a stool at the bar. There weren't many customers in the tavern in the afternoon, so Benzo walked over to Powder. He leaned on the bar, looking at her. Powder raised her hand listlessly, paused, and said, "By the way, make the lemons sour. Did you have another fight with Six?" Benzo prepared the iced black tea, a sweet and sour beverage, while asking Powder. "Hat, she hit me today, she hit me." Powder took off her hat, turned her little face, and pointed at her slightly reddened chin. She said loudly to Benzo, "Look here. What did you do to provoke her again?" Benzo took a quick glance. It wasn't too serious, but there were indeed red marks. Well, it looked more like pinching than hitting. "Well, she hit me anyway." Powder shifted away from this topic. Moreover, Linn clearly said he would be back on Progress Day. "I told everyone he was coming back, but he hasn't come back today. Did you try calling him on his Hextech phone?" Powder nodded, "I did." "Did he say where he went?" Benzo asked Powder. In fact, the news of Linn coming back wasn't just something Powder was talking about. The old folks in the alley also knew about it. Vander was a big mouth too, and Powder resembled Vander in that aspect. Putting the iced black tea in front of Powder, Benzo looked at her. Taking a sip with the straw, Powder sucked in the ice-cold red tea. Her eyes squinted due to the sourness. After getting used to it, Powder let out a satisfying burp. Then she spoke. "He didn't pick up the call, Benzo." "He never picked up. What about today?" "I haven't called today." "Try calling him now. Maybe he was in a place with no signal from Piltover and Zaun. There's a stretch over the sea with no signal," Benzo suggested. "Right." Powder immediately took out her Hextech phone. Benzo was right. He didn't ignore her calls, he simply couldn't receive them. Not answering the call and being unable to answer the call had different meanings. Biting the straw, Powder dialed the number. Then she placed it on the bar, covering her hands with her sleeves, and held the cold iced tea with both hands. She looked at Benzo, big eyes staring at him. Do. Facing each other, one big and one small, the beautiful blue Hextech phone lay between them. "Hello? Powder." Just when Powder was about to be disappointed again, the call went through. "Why you, where are you now?" Powder quickly stood up, bending down and leaning close to the phone. Seeing this scene, Benzo found it both amusing and helpless. Amusing because seeing Powder's excited face, the frustration and anger from being bullied by her sister earlier, and Linn not answering the calls, all dissipated in this moment. Her emotions came and went quickly. Helpless because Benzo felt there was really no hope for the one from his family. As Echo's foster father, Benzo knew Echo had feelings for Powder. But clearly, Powder had really liked him since she was little. This feeling hadn't changed for 6 years. "Ha ha ha, take it easy, the voice on the other end, that little scoundrel Linn, said cheerfully. "No laughing. Linn, you tell me quickly, where are you right now? Why haven't you come back? It's already the 3rd day. The 3rd afternoon." Powder's face was practically against the Hextech phone. Her beautiful blue braids were almost touching the floor. But the voice that echoed from the Hextech phone wasn't Linn's, it was a very familiar voice to Powder. "Whose call is this? We're in a meeting right now, Linn, stop laughing, be serious. Hang up quickly." The person spoke discontentedly. Powder knew this voice too well. Okay, Vander, I'll hang up. What's the rush? I told you I would check. I'm already back, of course, I'll handle those things." "You really?" Linwen's voice, full of helplessness, interrupted. Listening to the voice on the phone, Powder blinked her beautiful blue eyes with force. So much information. And Vander? Powder, I'm a bit busy right now. Wait for me, and later in the evening, I'll come find you in 6. After saying this, Linwen hung up without waiting for Powder to respond. Bang! The door of the White Dove Tavern was forcefully pushed open from the inside, then it slammed into the wall, making a loud noise. Dong! It bounced back. Benzo watched Powder, who had already rushed out, shaking his head and chuckled softly. Wait! She's waited long enough for you, you scoundrel! She can't wait any longer. Chapter 94-93 Who is she? 6 is resting today, so her little brother Clagger has to take over 6's duties. Right now, standing tall at a whopping 1.9 meters and sporting the same physique as Vander during his youth, Clagger is in the streets wearing the uniform of a Zaun enforcer, looking quite intimidating. He is also the most formidable fighter in the small group besides 6, easily capable of taking on 10 Milos now. Carrying a massive hextech greatsword on his back, Clagger is on patrol. Then he spots someone running swiftly. 2 blue braids dance in the air as the girl runs quickly. Powder! Seeing Powder, Clagger quickly greets his little sister, shouting from a distance, "Where are you going? Slow down! Hey, Clagger!" Powder doesn't stop, but she turns around, running backward, waving her hand. Her face is bright red, and she smiles. "I have something to do, Clagger, so I won't stop and chat with you." Powder has a good relationship with both Clagger and Milo. Unlike Milo, who always bullies her verbally but has a good relationship in reality, Clagger is exceptionally gentle. In Powder's eyes, her brother is like a simple and honest big bear. However, when necessary, he can turn into a fierce beast, protecting Powder. So Powder likes him a lot. And to Clagger, Powder doesn't behave rudely like she does to Milo. She just smiles and says, "I have to go first." In theory, Powder shouldn't do this. But Clagger can only shout loudly, "You better watch the road, Powder." Okay, I know." Powder turns around after saying this and runs ahead again. She's extremely excited at the moment. Running from the White Dove Tavern to the Council Center in Zaun, the former location of the Last Drop Tavern, is not actually far. Powder only took about 10 minutes to run there. As 6's younger sister, with her sister's extraordinary physical qualities, Powder's own physical condition is certainly not inferior. Powder steps into the door and proceeds inside. Along the way, a staff member notices Powder and tries to stop her, saying, "Hey, you can't." But before the staff member can finish, someone next to him grabs him. "Shut up! Why? Mr. Vander and Mr. Silko are having a meeting right now. It's you who told me that Mr. Silko hates being interrupted during meetings." "That's true, but she's different. She can go in." This Zaunite, originally following Silko, looks at Powder's figure and explains, "She's Powder. The one who drew graffiti on Silko's cup and also drew on Silko's face while he was napping? That Powder?" "Yes, it's her, Vander's daughter." The two glance at each other and simultaneously shrug. Powder, she is the most favored girl in Zaun. In Zaun's political center, perhaps some people haven't seen Powder, but they have definitely heard her stories. If they didn't know Vander was Powder's father, many would think that Silko was Powder's father. Who? Maybe I should wait. I need to think this through. At the gate, Powder, who was so excited just now, suddenly stops. She stands outside the closed gate, lowering her head. The idea of kicking open the gate and appearing in front of Linwen has disappeared. After all, when it comes down to it, Powder suddenly feels a bit timid. She really wants to see Linwen. But, so many years have passed, her hair has grown so long, is Linwen still the Linwen she knows? Has he changed in any way? Walking back and forth outside the gate, Powder touches her chin, lost in thought. "Hey, Linwen, it's me, I'm Powder. Didn't expect it, right? I've grown up now. Am I super beautiful?" This won't do. This will seem too narcissistic. The initial plan of meeting face to face is vetoed by Powder. "Linwen." Outside the gate, Powder makes a hugging gesture and then lifts her head. "You're finally back, I missed you so much." Before finishing her sentence, Powder lets go of her hands, hugs her arms, and shivers. No, no, no. I can't do it. I really want to hug him. But, after not seeing each other for so long, doing such a thing feels extremely embarrassing. Clearly, she used to just pounce on Lynn and then put her arms around his neck. Now she can't even give a hug? Her fingers hurt from biting, and various plans come to mind. Powder suddenly realizes something. That is, she might not be as brave as she imagined. But the desire to see Lynn is unquestionable. She really misses him. So, after nearly 100 rounds of internal struggle, Powder finally gathers the courage. Unbeknownst to her, she's been standing outside the gate for over half an hour. Taking a deep breath, Powder places her hands on the door. Then, with a strong push, she opens the door. This matter doesn't need further discussion. I've said it countless times. Ordinary people and middle-class families in Piltover are never our enemies, they are our compatriots. Our real enemy is only the major families that control Piltover. Whether we drive them away or kill them, in any case, I don't want to hear you talk about an all-out war against Piltover again. Zaun will take action, but we need to choose the right direction, slap the right people. Before, I would definitely disagree with Linwen's idea, but now, I support Linwen's idea. Going into an all-out war with Piltover, we may not necessarily win. In fact, I prefer to maintain the current situation, but I deeply understand that it's impossible. Silko, you've changed quite a bit. Take a look at yourself now, then talk to me about that. The door is slowly pushed open, and Powder hears voices from inside. Powder hears Linwen's voice. She feels her heart beating faster. Thump, 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 thump. Damn it, it's like when she's crafting little rockets. She thinks her heart is like a little rocket ready to launch. Then the door is fully opened. Everyone's gaze, Vander, Silko, all turn towards the door, with a hint of disapproval. But when they see a little head peeking in from the door, eyes filled with a bit of timidity. Hey! Powder greets everyone. Then, Powder sees him. He has changed a lot, standing there just a bit shorter than Vander. Clearly, Vander used to tower over him. The handsome young man with black hair looks at her face in astonishment and blurts out, Jinx. No, Powder. Powder excitedly nods. Yes, it's me. It's Powder. Next, Powder notices someone standing behind Lynn. Closely following Lynn. It's an incredibly beautiful woman. Powder. Who is she? Chapter 95-94 Lynn. The words echoed in her mind, almost slipping out at one point. But Powder held back. Powder, we are working right now, Vander said, looking at his beloved daughter who stood behind the door with a disapproving tone. I know you want to see Lynn, but you can wait. Let us finish our discussion first. Silko, sitting in a chair, tapped his forehead with 2 fingers, watching Powder shaking her head slightly. He thought to himself that she lacks patience, her feelings laid bare in front of Lynn. But it could be both good and bad. At least, she boldly reveals her emotions, always has been. Silko thought Powder's mind might be in turmoil right now, indulging in some imaginative scenarios. Yeah, self-indulgence. She really enjoys doing this. Silko thinks this might be one of the reasons she's a genius. Did I disturb you? Powder stepped away from the door but didn't leave, walking in. Vander opened his mouth, ready to say it's a obvious matter. Still, Silko beat him to it, issuing the command, all right, let's call it a day. Rest up, but reconvene at 8 p.m. tonight. Some matters need to be addressed in the next few days, or nobody's leaving. We've delayed long enough. Why are you looking at me when saying this? Lynn blinked, displeased, looking at Silko. Is this guy targeting me? I haven't received a warm welcome since my return. Silko lifted his eyes, calmly looking at Lynn, saying, whose fault do you think it is that we've come to this point? Lynn was rendered silent. He just shut his mouth and stared at Silko. Silko waved his hand, loudly declaring, meeting adjourned. Vander wanted to say something more, but seeing Powder running to Lynn, he just shook his head with a bitter smile. This kid, Lynn. Have a good chat. I'm going to eat something. After everyone left, only 3 people remained in the room, or rather, 2.5. Jayce, unaware of what transpired, looked at Linwen and the blue-haired girl who was much shorter than him, leaving her in a fog. Linwen also gazed at Powder in front of him with a strange feeling. This appearance, Linwen initially thought, 6 is still 6 but Powder is not Jinx, but once Powder's hair grew long, forming 2 distinctive braids, he couldn't help but think, isn't this Jinx? Your hair. How is it? Looks good, right? What were you thinking? Letting your hair grow so long? Powder shook her head, swaying the 2 braids behind her. She stole a glance at Jayce, who stood there, seemingly wanting to ask Linwen who she was. Still, the thoughts and the words that came out were different. After you left, I started growing my hair, thinking about when you'd come back. I planned to cut it when you returned, but you were away for so long. Then it ended up like this. Powder held one braid with her hand, gently swaying it, as if cracking a whip. Linwen listened, momentarily taken aback. He used to help Powder with her hair, just as he did with 6, but 6 didn't like him touching her hair. Linwen wore a helpless smile, instinctively reaching out to pat Powder's head. However, when his hand hovered over her head and met her gaze, Linwen hesitated. Old Zoran, Silko, and Vander, everyone seemed to believe that Powder and he had a certain kind of relationship. Linwen realized there were reasons for this perception. He used to spoil and be very close to Powder. Consequently, people often regarded them differently. Linwen's hand lingered above Powder's head, unable to come down. Besides acknowledging this aspect, there was a certain distance that naturally crept in after being away for so many years. This distance would take some time to dissipate. Unexpectedly, Linwen did manage to pat Powder's head. Rising on her toes, Powder proactively rubbed her head against Linwen's hand. Linwen, unable to see her face, playfully patted her head, saying, "Now that I'm back. But there's no need to cut it. You look good this way." "Really? Of course, when have I lied to you? If you say something like that again, I might get angry." "Linwen, you promised to come back soon." "I said I'd come back on Progress Day, and today is Progress Day, right? That doesn't count as lying to you, does it?" "Well, okay, I'll let it pass." Powder jumped back, raising her eyebrows as she glanced at Jayce beside her. Her courage had depleted after that moment, and she wasn't sure what she had been thinking. Examining Jayce with her eyes, Powder asked, "Who are you?" Linwen, smiling, attempted to introduce Jayce. He put his hand on her shoulder and gently pushed her forward, starting to say, "She." "I want her to say it herself," Powder interrupted, looking at Linwen's hand with pursed lips. Jayce, meeting Powder's gaze, sensed a subtle hostility. It wasn't intense, but Jayce could feel it. Unlike the other Zaunites Linwen had introduced her to, Powder seemed to harbor a dislike towards her. Jayce, sensitive to such attitudes, could understand. After all, her appearance could be quite intimidating. Remaining calm, Jayce replied, "I'm Jayce." "Jayce? That's a strange name. Where are you from?" Powder questioned. Linwen, Strange? Stranger than strange, whose name could be stranger than yours? Powder sounded cute when she was little, adorable even, but now that she has grown up, being called Powder always feels a bit odd. "Shurima." Powder continued, "And why does your clothes look so weird?" "I can't tell you about the clothes," Jayce replied coolly. "That's okay," Powder said, spreading her hands, facing Jayce's indifferent demeanor. Despite Jayce's strong presence, Powder showed no fear. Stepping forward, she asked, "What's your relationship with Linwen?" "Powder," Linwen quickly interjected in a hushed tone. "Something's off. What's with this atmosphere? It's not just Jayce's attitude. Let's forget about Jayce for now. What's Powder trying to do?" "A friend. He asked me to come to Zaun," Jayce answered, eyeing the girl who was shorter than her. "She's very cute but always looks fierce." Jayce noticed that Powder's attitude toward her was different. Not exactly fear, but a strange feeling. This left Jayce perplexed. She didn't understand what she had done to provoke such a reaction. "Where are you staying now? At an inn, tavern, or did Linwen find you a place?" Powder inquired. "I'm staying at Zoran's house," Jayce replied. Powder stepped back, and the imposing aura disappeared in an instant. She pointed at Jayce with a trembling hand, then looked at Linwen and exclaimed, "You too? You too, slept? Dong." A light punch landed on Powder's head, and Lin vigorously rubbed her head. What are you thinking? We're just friends, Lin explained. Powder looked up at Lin, then at Jayce, and back at Lin. Really? 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 Dot. Is she just a friend even though she's so pretty? Powder persisted. Powder is still not giving up. Who knows what he's been doing all these 4 years? Lin? Just tell me what you want. Chapter 96-95 Powder, I can't beat her. Powder really wanted to grab Linwen's arm and bombard him with questions about what he was thinking. 4 years of absence, and now he brings a woman back? Don't you know my feelings? How else do I express myself? Standing there, Powder looked distressed. She was now 17, no longer a child. She had hoped to tell Linwen about her feelings when he returned, but this unexpected situation arose. Why did she have to deal with this when she was the one who came first? Powder was aware of how Linwen had always seen her, as a sister. But she had grown up, and she wanted Linwen to see her differently. However, seeing Jayce made her emotions even more complex. Thinking about her own maturity, Powder looked at Jayce with a critical eye. Despite her dissatisfaction, Powder had to admit that Jayce was a beautiful woman. As Powder's gaze traveled down, her initial disdain turned into shock, resentment, and finally, a sense of frustration. Powder's eyes were filled with grievances. She felt so unfair. The reason for her grievance was that she thoroughly examined Jayce. Examined Jayce's neck, chest, waist, hips, legs, everything. Powder. Silently lowering her head, a feeling of defeat crept in. Linwen, puzzled by her sudden mood, said, "What's going on?" "I told you, she's just a friend." "Linwen, do you see her as a sister too?" Powder approached Linwen, looking up at him. "Tell me, is it true? You always liked collecting younger sisters, right?" "When did I ever say I liked collecting younger sisters?" Linwen exclaimed as he looked at Powder. "Younger sisters? The only siblings I have are you and 6. And the way you talk about collecting younger sisters sounds strange, almost like a weird lolicon." Linwen explained, "Jayce and I are the same age." Powder responded, "Ah. Well, this is unexpected." Powder had a direct moment. Same age? Powder realized she couldn't compete. Not exactly. After calming down, she realized that the woman Linwen brought back was really good looking. Especially her figure. How did she achieve such a balanced physique? Even better than 6. Powder used to think her sister 6 had a great figure, but now, looking at Jayce, Powder suddenly felt 6 was a bit plump. Her physique was just too perfect. If she had to use animals to describe, Powder would say 6's figure was like a lion, strong and muscular, with a certain female charm. But this woman named Jayce was like a cheetah, perfectly proportioned and flawless. Upon comparison, 6's muscles seemed a bit exaggerated. As for Powder's own physique? What physique? The word physique had nothing to do with her. She used to think her only advantage over 6 was her long legs. But now, looking at Jayce, Powder suddenly felt so unfair. Her face is attractive, taller than herself, larger breasts, and a perfect chest shape. Even under the tight outfit, it looks lifted. Is this for real? Moreover, what makes Powder really angry is that, even though she looks much slimmer than 6, she has the same big butt as 6. And she's even taller than 6. How am I supposed to compete with this? I can't beat her. Powder temporarily fell into a state of melancholy. And Linwen, concerned, looks at Powder, but he absolutely has no idea what she's thinking right now. Powder bites her finger, frustrated. I've been drinking milk diligently, but why can't I grow? Oh Goddess Janna, can you tell me the reason? This is just not fair. After she calmed down, it's been over 10 minutes. Powder took a deep breath. Then she saw Jayce whispering in Linwen's ear on the side. Powder's anger immediately surged again. You're doing this right in front of me, hey? Does that mean you're even closer in private? And indeed, Linwen and Jayce were secretly talking. But the content was about Powder. Is she the sister you were talking about? Yeah, isn't she cute? Cute? Ah, she is cute, but Linwen, your sister seems to dislike me. The way she looks at me is strange, and I'm familiar with that look. It's like I stole something from her. Well, this is not your fault, Jayce. It's my problem. Lynn said to Jayce with a wry smile. Being liked by Powder. When she was little, he could consider it as a younger sister's affection for her older brother. But slowly, Lynn realized that Powder's feelings for him and Six were different. Since when did Powder start liking me in that way? Lynn had an indescribable feeling. Is he happy? Of course, very happy. He's a normal man. Powder has changed a lot, becoming very beautiful, exactly like the Jinx he knew, but different. Powder's eyes are blue, a very beautiful blue. Looking at himself, her eyes were full of joy. Being liked by someone from the bottom of their heart is, of course, a happy thing. But Lynn is a bit at a loss, he finds it challenging to deal with this kind of affection. After all, he's not someone with a lowly complex. Back then, Lynn really treated Powder like a little sister, without any other thoughts, including towards the more mature Six. At that time, they were just focused on surviving, surrounded by dangers, and when they discovered these feelings, there was no time to deal with them. Dragging on, he thought as time passed and they grew up, Powder's feelings would change. But now, Lynn realizes that Powder's feelings for him have not only weakened but have become stronger. He thought Powder liked him because Milo would often bully her, and he was always there to protect and care for her. So, she liked him. In any case, Lynn is now in a difficult position. Should I keep my distance from you? Jayce noticed Powder's gaze. At this moment, Linwen's sister was holding her blue braid with both hands, opened her mouth, and bit it angrily, standing there looking at Linwen and Jayce. Her feet in long boots were stomping the ground forcefully, she was extremely angry. This action made Jayce find it both funny and cute. Should hair be bitten? Biting her own hair? Doesn't it hurt? Even if it doesn't hurt, having wet hair doesn't feel good, right? Linwen tilted his head and also noticed Powder's actions. Helplessly, he called out softly, Powder. I'm here. In response to Linwen's voice, Powder immediately hopped over. You. Getting close to Linwen, Powder looked up at him expectantly. Let's talk later. Okay. What does it feel like to be isolated? Jayce thought she was familiar with this feeling. She thought she had gotten used to loneliness. She could accept loneliness, but now, watching Linwen and his sister chatting happily while she sat there eating, Jayce surprisingly felt the desire to speak up. She wanted to talk, with Linwen and his sister. Otherwise, it would be really awkward. But she couldn't join in. And the slight sense of unfamiliarity between Linwen and Powder, which was present when they hadn't seen each other for a long time, had now disappeared. Their relationship had always been good. The joy of meeting immediately washed away that hint of unfamiliarity, and the topics they could discuss became more abundant. Sitting there, Jayce hugged her knees, looking a bit pitiful as she stared at them. She didn't know what she was thinking. After getting to know Linwen, Jayce felt she had become weaker. Clearly, weakness in the void is a big taboo. Reaching out, she took a cookie from the nearby plate, nibbling it like a hamster, and Jayce ate several cookies in succession. Then, comforting herself in a whisper. But I'm not in the void right now. So, it's okay to rest a bit. Anyway, no one will say anything to me. She glanced at Linwen and Powder. The two were laughing and talking. And Jayce? Since you guys aren't going to talk to me. Well, then I'll just keep eating. Chapter 97-96 I don't believe it. 2 hours later, Silko was the first to enter the hall. He was punctual, often arriving at the agreed-upon location before the scheduled time. Opening the door, Silko first glanced at Powder, who was happily chatting with Linwen. Then, he tilted his head and looked at Jayce, sitting not far away. Next, Silko's eyes twitched. Linwen, it's time, he said. Already 8 o'clock? That's fast. No, there are still 8 minutes. Silko opened his pocket watch, took a glance, and continued, but Powder, you need to leave now. Can't I stay and listen? I'm the head of the weaponry department, I should have that right? Powder looked at Silko, tilting her head, and asked. No, I've given you enough time. Now it's time for you to give me some time. Powder, this is a fair matter. Otherwise, when your sister arrives, should I also give her time? Silko, hands behind his back, lectured, you should be able to discern right from wrong, remember what I taught you. Ah, right, right, right. Powder raised both hands, palms open, and rolled her eyes dramatically, expressing impatience. I'm leaving, but Silko, can't you stop trying to brainwash people with just a couple of sentences? This isn't brainwashing, it's basic principles and one of the most difficult ones, fairness. You keep saying it's not brainwashing. Powder muttered, stood up, and walked a few steps to Silko's side. She leaned close to him, turned around, and then, looking at Jayce, exclaimed, she has to come out too. Silko hesitated for a moment, then smiled lightly. He looked at Powder, nodded, and said, of course. Lynn, let your friend and Powder go out for a while. She's been sitting here since the afternoon, it's good for her to go out and relax. Jayce, do you want to go out? Lynn didn't immediately agree but asked for Jayce's opinion. Can I go out? Jayce blinked. In fact, she had long wanted to go out for some fresh air. She found the discussions these people had quite boring. After all, she was a girl who lacked 10 years of common sense. I've said it before, in Zaun, you can go wherever you want. No one will stop you, but be careful not to hurt anyone. Not everyone can control their strength like me, Lynn urged. Understood. Got it. Lynn nodded, looked at Powder, and said, Powder, take Jayce outside for a walk, but don't go too far. Okay. Also, Powder, no bullying her. Lynn said seriously. Powder made snake-like movements with her hands towards Lynn, making a playful attack. When she withdrew, she made a soft tisk sound, then turned around. With a lively bounce, she moved forward and called out, let's go, follow me. Jayce immediately followed, leaving Lynn and Silko alone. That Shurima girl, she sure can eat, Silko said with a smile, looking at the empty fruit basket and dessert plate left by the beautiful Shurima woman. During meetings, snacks were usually provided as suggested by Vander, and Silko didn't oppose it. After all, these discussions often lasted for several hours, and having something to eat when hungry was a joyous thing. She ate it all. She can eat quite a bit. It seems she's not human yet, but her heart is still human, it's just her body that isn't. Silko nodded. I can tell, and her skin, you don't need to give me that look. I'm not interested in women. Lynn's eyes immediately sharpened. Seeing Lynn's reaction, Silko sighed and continued, I'm not interested in men either. I have a good memory. When we first met, I noticed a cloud-like pattern on her arm, but when she walked past me just now, that pattern was around her waist. But, Lynn, she didn't change her clothes. It moves, and it's not technology, so it must be something else. Dynamic skin, you guessed it right, that's her skin, moving skin. Moving skin. How strong is she? Silko asked a crucial question. Strong, very strong. If I don't stop her, she could have wiped you all out in less than a minute, Lynn said. He thought about Jayce's ability to launch rocket attacks with a lift of her hand and the appearance of the pod on her shoulder, firing at full firepower. Lynn shuddered. In a one-on-one fight, Lynn was definitely stronger than Jayce, but when it came to firepower, Jayce's destructive power was overwhelming. She was like a humanoid arsenal. Silko nodded after listening to Lynn's words. Is she the weapon you found in Shurima? No, she's our friend, Lynn replied with a slight smile. At the same time, on the third floor, Powder led Jayce to the balcony, leaning on the railing, holding 2 bottles of drinks. Here, Powder opened a can and handed it to Jayce. What is this? Jayce took the can, observing the fruit pattern and feeling the coolness in her hands. It's a drink, for you, Powder replied. Jayce smelled the drink and was delighted by the sweet aroma. She loved sweet treats. Rather than drinking immediately, Jayce held the can, leaned her arm on the railing, and watched Powder, who was casually sipping her own drink. You seem to dislike me, so why are you giving me this? Jayce asked, her arm still raised with the can. Hey! Oh, right! Yes, I don't like you, Powder turned around, took a sip, burped involuntarily, then smiled, but don't worry, I won't hurt you. By the way, I have a question for you. Jayce looked at Powder, both hands holding the small can, quietly sipping her drink. What's your relationship with Lynn? Powder quickly added, I mean, Do you like Lin? Powder spoke rapidly, like, love, well, anyway, you're older than me, you should understand what I mean. We are friends, comrades, Jayce replied. Really? Really? Powder turned her back to Jayce, twisted her small butt, and sighed deeply. Drinking the sweet beverage in one go, she said, I don't believe it. What I said is true, Jayce said earnestly. Just because you don't like him now doesn't mean you won't like him in the future. Powder looked at a large box in the distance, then whooshed the empty can she had finished drinking and accurately threw it into the box on the ground. Squinting one eye, Powder aimed her hand at the box, bringing two fingers together in a shooting gesture. Phew! He's so nice, you'll know it slowly, Powder assured Jayce. At that time, if you still don't like him, then you have a problem, she added. Jayce silently sipped her drink, unsure of what to say. So, if I like him, you'll dislike me, and if I don't like him, you'll still dislike me? What exactly do you want? Chapter 98-97 I will protect you. Communicating with Jayce turned out to be quite unexpected for Powder. Despite Jayce's seemingly aloof appearance, she was surprisingly easy to talk to. Whenever Powder spoke, Jayce responded, even if just with a few words, but her attitude was friendly, making it clear she was genuinely answering. Powder found it amusing not only was Jayce attractive and fit, but her personality seemed pleasant too. Deciding to take a break, Powder asked, I need to use the restroom. Want to come along? I don't need to use the restroom, Jayce replied. Powder was puzzled, what do you mean? I don't need to use the restroom, Jayce repeated. Powder stared at Jayce, inspecting her carefully under the moonlight and artificial light. Are you joking? Is this some kind of joke? No, I really don't need to use the restroom, Jayce explained. Can't you notice this layer on my body? Jayce wanted to say that the food she consumed would be digested, but she wasn't sure how to explain it to Powder. In her understanding, once her body absorbed the necessary nutrients, her skin would then extract the remaining nutrients and residue. Her skin could eat. It could also be hungry. Moreover, it could evolve. So, Jayce really didn't need to use the restroom. Lin had already expressed his thoughts on Jayce's physiological aspects, stating that real beautiful girls don't need to use the restroom. Isn't that a tight-fitting suit you're wearing? Powder asked. No, this is my skin, Jayce raised her arm, attempting to show Powder carefully. Powder was quick to approach. She was even curious enough to reach out and touch Jayce's arm. Though Jayce instinctively wanted to retract her hand, Powder had already grabbed her arm, using her fingertips to explore Jayce's skin. The action made Jayce feel ticklish and strange. Attempting to pull back, she realized her efforts were in vain. Remembering Linwen's advice about controlling force, Jayce endured the strange sensation of being touched by Powder. After a while, Powder looked up at Jayce with amazement, her scientific curiosity ignited, eyes gleaming. She loudly asked Jayce, what are you? Jayce thought, is she cursing at me? Powder also realized her words were inappropriate and hastily explained, I mean, what is this on your body? Is it your skin? But that can't be right. It moves. Does it have life, or even consciousness? Does it make any sound? Jayce nodded, yes. Wow. Don't move, let me touch. Powder's small hands explored Jayce's waist. Powder squatted down, hands sliding down Jayce's thighs and buttocks. Powder's eyes carefully examined the purple carapace patterns. Powder discovered that, upon her touch, the skin felt slightly rough and cold, and it actually had life. It contracted. This was too amazing. This revelation sparked great interest in Powder. Leaning her face against Jayce's waist, Powder used both hands to encircle Jayce's waist, preventing her from moving. Eager to hear any potential sounds, Powder pressed her ear against Jayce's stomach. Do they talk? If they have life, they must have consciousness, right? Will they cause any movement? Jayce placed her hands on Powder's head, gently pushing it away. She was surprised by Powder's sudden curiosity. No one had ever been so close to her before. Never. Jayce whispered, please don't do this. It makes me uncomfortable. Don't move, don't move. Let me study you properly. How did you get this purple skin? Is it magic? A curse? Or is it the science of Shurima? Powder circled Jayce, inspecting her from top to bottom. Ah! Wait, I suddenly realized a problem. Since what you're wearing is your skin. Do you have clothes on now? Powder blinked, observing Jayce's exceptional figure. She suddenly noticed something. If this isn't padded, without clothes holding it up, isn't that too much? I've got a bit of padding, at least. Jayce froze, standing there in silence. She knew what Powder was about to ask because Lynn had asked her the same question before. Even though everything that should be covered was covered, Jayce, indeed wasn't wearing clothes. You. Okay, I won't ask. I already know the answer. Looking at Jayce, who had lowered her head, Powder let out a hollow chuckle. Suddenly, the interest in her research disappeared. So it's the real deal. Oh, Goddess Janna, the blow to my morale is too significant. Powder looked forlornly at the sky, feeling that her life was bleak. Then, Powder noticed a sudden grayness in front of her. A strange, grey object obscured her vision. The next moment, sensing danger, Powder swiftly lunged forward, evading the object in a rather undignified manner. When Powder climbed back up, she saw the thing that had attacked her. It was a metal grappling hook. Run! Powder hastily shouted to Jayce, then saw the owner of the grappling hook. It was a tall woman with white hair. She stood on the wall, looking down at Powder with an indifferent expression. Beside the metallic blades of her legs, there were two devices that shot out two grappling hooks, one hooked onto the wall, and the other pierced the spot where Powder stood. Shoo! The grappling hook swiftly retracted. The peculiar woman hung on the wall, scrutinizing Powder. Then, she murmured, "Interesting. The head of Zaun's weapon department. It matches the picture." Powder eyed her, recalling Silko's words. "Are you Camille?" Powder blurted out. Silko had warned that this woman was dangerous. Powder had seen her picture. "What is she?" "Oh, yes, Piltover's top-secret agent." The white-haired woman on the wall was momentarily surprised. She hadn't expected the Zaun girl to know her name. "In that case, I can't let you go," Camille whispered, then her two blade-like legs tensed. In the next moment, she catapulted off the wall, leaving two huge blade marks behind. In the air, Camille's delicate leg-mounted devices shot out two grappling hooks towards Powder. Powder resisted, pulling out the small pistol that had been hanging from her waist. Powder quickly aimed at Camille. "Although she's fast, I'm confident in my shooting." Powder squinted her eyes, preemptively aligning the tiny gun towards where she predicted Camille would appear. Then, in the next moment, Powder's body flew a bit backward. The small pistol, only about the size of Powder's palm, erupted into a tremendous spectacle. A hextech gem embedded in the gun cracked open, and from the barrel, a thin blue beam shot towards the flying woman. Powder aimed for her chest. Child's play. Camille looked at the electromagnetic beam rapidly approaching her chest, coldly remarking. She quickly changed the color of her shining eyes from blue to yellow, then swiftly back to blue. Finally, it settled on yellow. A yellow barrier appeared in front of Camille's chest, blocking Powder's attack. Camille lifted her leg slightly, controlling the grappling hook she had previously shot out. The hook underwent a mid-air change and then stabbed towards Powder, who was lying on the ground after being blasted away by the gunshot. Camille's expression remained indifferent. She seemed to foresee that in the next moment, her grappling hook would pierce through the heart of the young girl in front of her. However, Camille's inner emotions remained undisturbed. It was as if she were performing a routine, mundane task. Powder, on the other hand, panicked. She hadn't brought all her weapons since she was supposed to meet Linn and only had her electromagnetic pistol. But this thing had no protective capabilities. Firing it even sent her flying. Gritting her teeth, facing the incoming grappling hook, Powder opened her mouth to scream. But the tip was already at her chest. As if about to pierce through her chest in the next moment. "I'm already small, ugh. And she still targets there." Just as Powder was about to succumb to despair, at the moment Camille was about to retract the grappling hook, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Powder. Guarding her, facing towards the direction of Camille, effortlessly grabbing the grappling hook aimed at Powder. The tip remained halted, firmly in front of Powder's slightly heaving chest. Under Camille's furrowed brows, Jayce turned her head back, looking at Powder who now have a slightly frightened expression. She whispered, isn't she a Zaunite? Powder looked at Camille in amazement. She was about to kill me. Like hell she's a Zauntie. In this situation, Powder couldn't help but retort, she's our enemy, you idiot. Sorry, I thought she was your friend when I see you two spoke to each other, said Jayce apologetically. Holding the grappling hook, her hand emitted a dazzling purple light. Powder felt like the space in front of her face was burning and distorting. In the next moment, the grappling hook melted. The spiked end dropped to the ground, producing a metallic clashing sound. Powder lowered her head, contemplating the piece of metal near her. She melted it with her palm. When Powder raised her head, an even more surreal sight unfolded. She only saw two strange purple, crystal-like spikes appearing in front of Camille's fist. Near Jayce's slender shoulders, two initially illusory but gradually solidifying pods also emerged. The pods opened and closed, rapidly expanding. Finally, they attached like two wings behind Jayce. Jayce clenched her fist, as if gripping the crystal spikes in her hand. Purple virtual lines appeared on her face, and the purple skin gradually covered her neck, finally stopping at her chin. Standing in front of Powder, Jayce slightly bent her body, assuming a combat stance. She stared at the woman in front, softly saying, I will protect you. Don't worry, Powder. Chapter 99-98 Jayce vs Camille. On the third floor of the Zaunite Council meeting, Camille, with one hand on her waist, looked at Jayce across from her in astonishment. Her eyes flickered with alternating yellow and blue light, resembling the signal lights of hex gates. It made her look like a giant light bulb. Who are you? There shouldn't be someone like you in Zaun. Retrieving her grappling hook, Camille stood on the iron railing, overlooking Jayce. Her face showed a puzzled expression. Zaun did not have information about her, Camille realized as she looked at Jayce. Could Steven have missed gathering information on her? But that seemed unlikely. She knew Steven, and he wouldn't make such errors or omissions. Why did she not know about her? Camille wondered if this was the new technology in Zaun that Steven mentioned, a new alchemical invention. Additionally, Jayce's purple skin contradicted the information Camille had collected recently, shimmer. But something felt off. The information did not indicate that shimmer could cause such transformations. The girl in front of her looked like a demon at this moment. I am. Jayce was about to introduce herself, but Powder, who was beside her, quickly intervened. Why bother explaining to her? She's not a good person. Jayce was about to say something to Powder when Camille, who was standing nearby, quickly bent down, seized the moment Jayce turned her head, and launched an attack. As the most outstanding spy in Piltover, Camille was also an exceptional warrior. The blade sliced through the steel railing beneath her, and Camille leaped into the air. Her legs traced a beautiful silver arc in the moonlight, and the sharp silver radiance seemed to cut the sky in two. Camille attacked Jayce after bending her knees. Jayce narrowed her eyes, instinctively estimating the power of this attack. She decisively turned around, reaching out and grabbing Powder by the waist, pulling her into an embrace. Whoa! Slightly faster than Camille, Jayce, holding Powder, disappeared in a flash, reappearing on the other side of the battlefield. As Jayce vanished, Camille's legs struck the wall. Boom! On the wall, 3 blade marks slowly appeared. When Camille swung her leg to turn, the wall behind her collapsed and shattered. She looked at Jayce, more puzzled than ever. Gulp! Powder clutched Jayce's neck with both hands, frightened by this sudden attack. Jayce, she's really strong. How about we run? Hurry, get help. Linn can definitely take her down. Powder looked at the destroyed wall, finding it hard to imagine what would have happened if the leg attack had targeted her instead. She didn't believe her body was tougher than the wall, and Jayce's seemingly hard exoskeleton probably wouldn't withstand Camille's attack either. No need for Linn, I can handle her. Powder, find a place to hide. Jayce put Powder down, her aura turning assertive. Contrary to her previous demeanor, she issued commands to Powder. After saying this, Jayce raised her hand, pointing the purple crystal fist at Camille. They were at least a dozen meters apart. Camille stood there, perplexed. Could she be confident in her speed when aiming a fist at her from such a distance? Yes, from the previous scene, the purple-skinned woman was not slower than her, but Camille's speed was also considerable. Speed was one of Camille's confident weapons. And now, with a reaction distance of over 10 meters, Camille didn't believe Jayce could harm her. Moreover, close quarters combat was also Camille's expertise. Be careful. Jayce, if something happens to you, Lynn will scold me to death. Powder, obediently following orders, scampered away, shouting as she ran. Camille squinted, and her standing legs slightly moved forward. She couldn't let Powder escape. Given the laser attack from the small gun earlier and considering the fact that Powder, despite her young age, had become the head of Zaun's weapons department, Camille knew Powder was a threat. Her existence posed a danger to Piltover and threatened the Pharaoh's family's rule. Powder, who had escaped the battlefield once, was angry from the bottom of her heart. She had run away again. Damn it, if only she had brought all her weapons, including the boom boom gun, she wouldn't fear Camille. With this thought, Powder didn't look back. When she confirmed she had run to a relatively safe place, she peeked out. Boom! Purple flames swept into Powder's line of sight. The wall behind Camille, previously shattered by her attack, was now burning with purple flames. The ground emanated heat, and purple plasma rolled and churned on the ground. Don't move. Jayce lifted her chin, looking at Camille with indifference. At this moment, her face was also covered by the purple skin. Apart from her well-proportioned figure, which revealed she was still a human female, Jayce was no longer human at this moment. You. Camille looked at her grappling hook, which had been melted again. The last one was melted in the middle, and this time it was even more ruthless, directly melted into molten iron. Close quarters combat? Fist fight? Camille's expression changed, but she didn't reveal panic. She quickly analyzed the situation, simultaneously using Hextech to calculate the power of the luminescent projectile from before. In an instant, a bright blue light shone in Camille's eyes, even brighter than the previous ones. Camille herself was surprised. Is that purple magic light a magical projectile? Is this magic? And you're not human. Camille said as she bent forward and rushed forward. 2 damaged iron chains without spikes were thrown toward the ground. The tremendous force launched Camille out, executing a propulsion. Although the opponent had issued a final warning earlier, the magic projectile wasn't aimed at Camille but at the hook attacking the girl. Still, Camille didn't think she would lose. In Piltover and Zaun, no one could make Camille admit defeat. The Hextech thrusters activated, and the instruments at Camille's legs not only could deploy a grappling hook but now emitted a blue light. Heat rose, and 2 azure flames burned. Simultaneously, the power of the Hextech gem appeared, making time seem to accelerate. In Camille's eyes, the operation of things started to slow down. This was Camille's second propulsion. In just 2 seconds, Camille's legs appeared in front of Jayce. She lifted her leg fluently and struck downward. From speaking to appearing in front of Jayce, lifting her leg to strike, it took less than 3 seconds. This was too fast. But under the mask, Jayce, looking at Camille, hummed and retorted, "But you're not human either." Raising her hand toward Camille, Jayce saw the blue light radiating from her eyes again. Jayce knew she was about to release that magical shield again. She swiftly submerged, dodging rapidly. The axe-like blade didn't attack Jayce's abdomen, and Camille wasn't surprised. Adjusting her position, Camille's other leg stabbed toward Jayce's side. Boom! 2 light projectiles emitted from the fist spike. Jayce leaped backward, her movements as elegant as Camille's. However, quickly, a trace of panic flashed in her eyes. Silly girl! With both hands propped on the ground, Camille performed an inhuman movement. The blue barrier appeared in front of her, blocking the light projectiles released by Jayce. Simultaneously, Camille's hands on the ground exerted force, and the next moment, Camille started to dance. Legs spinning, Camille ascended while upside down. Her legs rotated rapidly, resembling instruments in high-speed operation. In just a moment, she attacked Jayce dozens of times. In the end, Camille kicked Jayce heavily, and Jayce's body turned into a shadow, crashing heavily into the wall. Jayce! Powder exclaimed anxiously. But despite Powder's anxiety, Camille's expression wasn't good. Clearly, she had attacked Jayce. But Camille's innermost gem, the one replacing her heart, gave a thud-like jump. The sensation was different. The sensory feedback from the Hextech leg blades made Camille feel like she had kicked a hard object. But even extremely hard gemstones could be easily cut by Camille's legs, so what in this world could withstand her legs? Let alone the flesh and blood of a human. Boom! A series of larger light projectiles were aimed at Camille. This time, the projectiles were denser, but the quantity didn't increase too much. 6, 7 of them? But even so, Camille quickly evaded. If all these consecutive light projectiles hit the energy shield, the shield's energy consumption would be too high. Jayce walked out of the wall, helmet disappearing, revealing her face. She shook her head lightly and, when she looked up, wore an unhappy expression. This woman called Camille, with her two blade-like legs, wasn't as formidable as Jayce thought. Jayce didn't need to be fully armed. But truth be told, Jayce's head was a bit dizzy now, and her lower abdomen and buttocks were extremely painful. It was so uncomfortable. Jayce thought about secretly rubbing her buttocks. She had been kicked 7 times there. Blade cutting the buttocks and such, it was both painful and humiliating. But Jayce resisted the urge, otherwise, it would be improper and even more embarrassing. And what irritated Jayce the most was that she couldn't fight freely. From earlier until now, Jayce had only released the weakest attacks. Every light projectile was carefully controlled. The power of the plasma was also extremely weak. Because Jayce knew that if she really unleashed her attacks freely, then perhaps this part of Zaun would disappear from this world the next day. But here's the problem. Jayce's close combat capability? Ha! A ranged champion fighting in close combat? In terms of combat skills, Jayce had to admit that she was indeed not as good as this woman. That superhuman technique from just now, Jayce couldn't even think of it. She lowered her head, trying hard to endure it. From defeating to just blocking, don't let her harm Powder. And then, control the power, don't harm innocent people. Lynn was right. I have to control the power. Jayce lifted her head, calmed down, and stared at Camille. And Camille? She suddenly felt the urge to retreat. / busy today, sorry for less upload. But this chapter is almost twice the normal chapter, so it's fine IG. And don't worry, I won't drop this. My other translation is already 800 chapters, so I don't just drop books without a good reason // Chapter 100-99 Subdued. Camille was genuinely considering making a run for it. After all, her most powerful assets were these specially crafted legs, and with the enhancement of Hextech, she believed her legs were among the world's top-tier weapons. However, now she couldn't even cut through this purple-clad woman's flesh? How could Camille accept this? As a spy, she was feeling a sense of retreat. Her mission was supposed to be capturing Vander, the father of Zaun, but unexpectedly, she encountered Vander's daughter, the head of weapons department. Camille initially planned to take Vander away, kill or even take Powder with her. The latter's existence would undoubtedly yield considerable benefits for the pharaoh's family. However, Camille was totally unprepared. Zaun had such a powerful individual. Watching Jayce charging at her, driven by the urge to retreat, Camille shifted from offense to defense. However, in close combat, Camille realized how uncomfortable it was. Jayce's speed was much faster than she expected. Under the power of Hextech, Camille could barely keep up with Jayce's movements and counterattack accordingly. But there was a problem. Camille's attacks caused minimal damage to Jayce. Despite the agility of her legs, whenever the blades touched Jayce's body, it only resulted in a slight frown or a gritted teeth from the latter. Soon, Jayce would charge back, delivering a flurry of chaotic blows. Jayce's close combat skills were truly lacking. In Camille's eyes, who was proficient in various martial arts, Jayce seemed like someone who hadn't learned any combat techniques, a person relying on instinct in a fight. Therefore, Camille could block all of her attacks. Even so, as Jayce's speed increased and she became more familiar with Camille's tricky leg techniques, Camille started feeling pressured. Especially those light projectiles fired at close range, those attacks were the most bothersome for Camille. The shield's energy was severely depleted, and she couldn't find a way to counter it. As Jayce entangled Camille, planning to wear her down, another figure sneaked in. Powder bent down, quietly moving forward. Her target was the laser gun under a broken stone. Powder was here to help. She wanted to assist Jayce in subduing Camille, considering Jayce had been taking a beating from her perspective. What could she do? Powder didn't know, but she didn't realize that, although Jayce looked somewhat battered, she was currently in the advantageous position, and it was Camille who was feeling overwhelmed. Avoiding Camille's gaze, Powder finally got hold of her previously lost laser gun. Camille was entangled by Jayce, unable to pay attention to Powder. Right now, Camille dared not to distract herself. Jayce's attack speed was increasing, and in close and long-range alternations, Camille only needed one moment of inattention, and the shield's energy would be massively depleted. Camille didn't know how long she could hold on. But escape? Camille tried that just now, but the moment the grappling hook was launched, Jayce directly reached out and grabbed Camille's hook, then tossed her along with the instrument away. If Camille hadn't reacted quickly, cutting off the grappling hook with her leg blades, she would likely be under Jayce's control by now. Jayce was faster than her, much faster. This woman might lack Camille's skills, but her physical qualities far exceeded Camille's. Camille felt a sense of powerlessness for the first time in her life. Previously, she had always used her mechanical legs and body to bully others. Now, she was the one being bullied. Unknown to Camille, while she was entangled in the struggle with Jayce, Powder had already taken up the laser gun, lying on the ground, squinting her eyes, and aiming at Camille. Ugh! I can do this! Powder took a deep breath, giving herself encouragement. The speed of these two was too fast, and in Powder's eyes, they were even leaving after images. But as a sharpshooter, at this distance, although the actions were fast, as long as you grasped the rhythm of their movements, it was manageable. Powder earnestly observed for a good half-minute. Then... boom! Jayce! Powder shouted loudly. Jayce, hearing the call, glanced and quickly reacted, both hands aimed at Camille. Jayce gathered her power. Damn it! Camille also noticed Powder's attack. Her eyes, shifting between blue and yellow, finally settled on blue. The energy shield could only respond to the same type of energy each time. This was why Camille's shield was so powerful precision. However, Powder's laser attacks had been analyzed by Camille's energy shield. That wasn't magical power. Although the laser gun borrowed the power of Hextech gems, the portion occupied by Hextech was not significant. Camille tried to dodge Powder's attack, but Jayce's palm was already pressed against her waist. Shortened by a considerable margin, Jayce aimed both hands at the blue shield that appeared in front of Camille and quickly exerted force. Bang! A crisp sound echoed. Purple light accompanied the shattered blue barrier, and Camille flew backward heavily. Behind her was the laser beam fired by Powder. Sizzle! The blue snake-shaped light entwined Camille's body. The sizzle sound continued, and Camille's body couldn't help but tremble. A sense of powerlessness surged. Although her heart and most of her body were mechanical, Camille knew that to become a top warrior, sensory perception was an indispensable part. Therefore, Camille's brain was not mechanized, and she did not eliminate her own sense of touch. In response, a massive electric shock plunged Camille into a state of paralysis. But with a strong will and a robust physique, Camille quickly regained her composure. But it was too late. Jayce stepped on Camille's stomach, bent down, and placed her palms in front of Camille's eyes. Don't move. Jayce said. That scared me. I thought I had hit you just now. Powder also ran up, holding a small pistol, and ran to Jayce's side, saying with a smile, I made a contribution. The scene that appeared earlier made Powder have a bit of goodwill towards this woman brought back by Lynn. Of course, just a bit. Let's tie her up first, then show Vander and the others. Powder suggested. Jayce nodded, pulled out Camille's grappling hook, and with Powder, they used Camille's grappling hook to tie her up tightly. During this process, Powder noticed something unusual. So she asked Jayce, why do you keep kicking her butt? Jayce immediately said, nothing. I absolutely wasn't retaliating.
Thanks for listening.